Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight we're going into 5 Airbnbs where strange things have been seen and heard. These aren't made-up ghost stories. They're real accounts of shadows moving, voices whispering, and footsteps in the dark. This is a new channel, so if you like true scary stories, please hit subscribe. It really helps, and there are many more horrors to come. Now, let's begin. I booked the cabin because the pictures made it look like a snow globe you could live inside. Big windows facing a frozen lake, a black iron stove with a neat pile of split wood next to it. The listing said it was 20 minutes outside a little town with a diner and a hardware store and not much else. We wanted quiet. We wanted a clean slate after a hard year. My girlfriend Leah loves winter in a way I never have. She said snow makes everything make sense. I said sure, as long as the place has heat and actual walls. We went the first week of January, when the roads are gray with old salt and the daylight gives up by 5. The drive from the city took longer than it should have. Then we turned off, onto a county road that was more like a white ribbon. It was already starting to flurry. The host, Elliot, messaged at 3:42 p.m. "Welcome. Driveway is steep. Put it in low and don't stop. Wood stacked by stove. Extra blankets in trunk. Please sign the guest book." He added a smiley. I typed back a thanks and put my phone on airplane because the signal went to 0 and the battery was dying faster in the cold. The cabin looked exactly like the photos but smaller, the way most places do in person. A frame with a metal roof, a deck that faced the lake. There was a little porch with a bench and 2 half-broken snow shovels leaned against the railing like old men. Inside the heat was on but thin, so we lit the stove. Leah knows how to do that properly, laying the kindling like a lattice, then the bigger pieces. That first exhale from the stove, that breath of warm pine and old smoke, made me think maybe this was going to work. We unpacked in that quiet way people do when they're trying not to step on old arguments. I stacked the dry goods on the counter. She put the toothbrushes in the cup. We were careful with each other. I noticed the guest book right away. It was on the coffee table, a leather-bound thing with a strap, not the cheap spiral notebook I expected. It had that old book smell, like attic dust and binder's glue. The first page had a little card from the host that said, "We love reading your memories," in a cheerful font. The pen tucked into the strap was a fountain pen which felt like overkill for a weekend rental. Leah laughed and said, "Of course. The kind of place where you get judged if you don't write a novel." The first night was nice in a normal way. We cooked pasta on the tiny range, drank red wine from chipped mugs because no one thought to stock actual wine glasses, and listened to the stove click and settle. It started to snow for real, slow and steady. The lake out the window was a flat, dim space, like someone had pulled black velvet over it. We crawled into the bed in wool socks and 3 blankets and tried to forget the city. I woke up once to the sound of paper moving, that dry whisper. But then the stove popped and I forgot about it. In the morning, I made coffee in the French press and opened the guest book to see what people wrote. I was expecting the usual great stay and lists of favorite hiking trails, a few passive-aggressive notes about the water pressure. There were those, but not the way I expected. I read an entry dated June 1996, complimentary about the new dock and how Annie caught a perch as big as her hand. The handwriting was neat, old-fashioned. The next page had a date from 2001 and mentioned a storm that knocked out the power and a neighbor named Hart who brought over candles. I flipped to the front again and checked the title page. It said, "The Pines Guest Register in gold." No brand or hotel name. I looked around the room like the date might be hiding on a wall. "Hey," I called. "When was this place built?" Leah was standing in the kitchen in one of my sweatshirts, pouring oatmeal into bowls. Says 2008 on the listing. Why? There are entries from the 90s. She shrugged. Maybe the book is from wherever they lived before. People reuse things. Yeah. I skimmed an entry from 2012 that said, "We left the lights on for her," which I assumed meant some inside joke. There were gaps, months where no one wrote. That made sense off-season. I found a pressed fawn-colored leaf, delicate as lace, between 2 pages. Then I found us. Not literally us, but a line that said, in the same neat handwriting, January, first week, snow soft as sifted sugar. Leah laughed when I read it to her. Someone else had our itinerary. Don't get creepy on me day 1. She pointed with her spoon. Will you sign our names so Elliot gets his precious memories? I uncapped the pen and wrote the date, our first names, and something bland about the stove being cozy and the lake being beautiful in winter. The pen scratched. The ink bled a little into the paper. I tried to blow on it like a movie old-timer, and Leah said, "Stop, you're getting ink on your lip." We drove into town to buy more food and a couple of extra logs because the stack by the stove felt like bravado rather than a real supply. The hardware store smelled like rubber and oil and had a rack of postcards that looked 20 years old. An older woman who could have been 60 or 90 rang us up. Her name tag said BEA. When I mentioned the pines, she lifted her eyebrows in a way that made me think she was going to say something, and then didn't. Instead, she said, "Roads. Supposed to drift tonight. If you need the plow, it's Ken. Numbers on the corkboard." She tapped a card. I took a photo of it in case we lost the paper. She lowered her voice a little and said, "Keep the stove door latched. Wind finds a way." On the way out, a guy in a green jacket held the door in that courteous way small towns have. He said, "You renting Elliot's place?" I said, "Yeah." He nodded, neutral, then added, "Don't prop the porch door, it whips." That was it. We walked back to the car in a strange hush, like the town had paused for a second. It started coming, down in the late afternoon, big flakes you could see individually. Leah sat on the floor by the fire, sketching in a notebook. I made a pot of chili that was too salty, and we drowned it in sour cream. It was one of those evenings where the silence is almost its own sound. The guest book sat on the table with the strap tucked under. We didn't fight. That's important to say because of what came next. We had been close to fighting earlier about whether I'd checked the oil. I hadn't. But we stopped ourselves. We actually said, "Let's not do that here." It felt like progress. Around 9, I picked up the guest book to write that the snow was beautiful and we were grateful for the space. Leah rolled her eyes and said, "You sound like a Christmas card." I grinned and reached for the pen. There was new writing on the page. It was our names, written cleaner than I write. Underneath, in small, neat letters, "Don't do that here." The same phrase we had used. And then, "The wind tries every seam." I felt the hair on the back of my neck lift because I had said that exact sentence about the cabin the night before, almost word for word. I looked at Leah, and at first she thought I was pranking her. And then she looked, and she went quiet in that way she does when her brain is reorganizing the furniture. "You wrote that," she said. "No, you're messing with me." "I'm not." We checked the pen. The tip was wet with the same black ink. Leah wiped the page with a tissue as if it would smudge. It didn't. The words sat there calmly, like they had always been part of the paper. We did the adult thing and decided not to let it ruin the night. That sounds dumb now, but you do that with weirdness. You shrink it. We put the book back on the table and set a mug on top like a paperweight. We played rummy by firelight, and I lost to a streak of queens. Around midnight, with the storm humming. Like a low machine, we crawled into bed. I listened for paper, but only heard what B called the wind finding a way. At some point, I slept. At 3:17 a.m., a clock somewhere I hadn't paid attention to ticked with a sound like a coin dropped into a glass. The door latch clicked. Not the outer door, but the interior one that led from the little entryway to the living room. I sat up. Leah did too at almost the exact same moment like we had agreed to. The door didn't open. The latch clicked and settled back. The stove made a tiny metallic ping like it was cooling. I got out of bed, moving the way you do when foreheads and toes are very important. The living room was dark except for the red eye of the stove and the rectangle of window whiteness. The guest book was open. My first stupid thought was that the mug had slid, but the mug was still a foot away. The book lay open to a blank page, except it wasn't blank. There, in that same hand, The same neat ink were the words, "Checkout, 3:17 a.m." Underneath it, smaller, "Please leave the door." Unlatched. I did not feel brave. I felt watched. My skin knew it before my brain did, the way skin sometimes knows when a spider is on it. The air felt crowded. I put my hands on the book to close it and the leather felt warm, which didn't make sense. Leah stood in the doorway in my sweatshirt and said my name, and I tried to make a joke and couldn't find the shape of one. We locked the interior door. We checked the outer door and deadbolted that too. Then we pushed the bench in front of it because theatrics make you feel in control. We sat at the table with the guest book between us like a third person and talked in low voices about rational things. The host might have a camera and a printer hidden. A previous guest might have left a trick pen. The book might be some gimmick. We looked for cameras and found none besides the visible smoke detector. We took the pen and locked it in the bathroom under the sink. We closed the guest book and strapped it shut and put it under the heavy cast iron pan. We stayed up until 4 to prove to ourselves that nothing happens just because a page says it will. Nothing did, unless you count the sounds of the house making itself more comfortable. We fell back asleep around dawn and slept like rocks until the light was flat again. The tracks on the deck looked like flour sifter patterns from the wind, no footprints, no scuffs near the door. The latch sat innocent and blank. We decided to take the book into town. That was Leah's idea. "Let's show it to someone," she said, meaning B, I think, or the police, but not really the police. The road had drifted, just like B said. We dug the top half of the driveway, cursed, sweated under our hats, and then gave up because our city muscles are not plow muscles. I called Ken's number from the photo on my phone. The call didn't go through. We stood in the cold until our eyelashes felt brittle, and then we went back inside. That afternoon, I opened the book because not looking at a thing makes it worse. The page that had asked us to leave was now filled with entries. Not dozens, just 4 or 5. All in that same hand. Some had dates, 2001, 2008, 2015, 2019. They all mentioned 3:17 a.m. in some way. Took her then, sent the keys across the counter. 3:17. Lights came back. We left the door. We left. There was an entry with no year, just first week, January, and below that. "We didn't fight," Leah said very carefully. "Put it away." I couldn't shake the feeling that the book had a personality. Not friendly, not hostile, just a force that wanted to record and be obeyed. I strapped it shut and carried it to the bedroom and put it in the bottom drawer under the spare blankets. We went outside to shovel a little more to have something practical to do. The snow had stopped, and the light was the color of paper. The lake made these soft, deep sounds like whales turning over, the ice shifting in its sleep. A Greene County truck rolled past at a crawl on the main road. The driver lifted his hand without smiling. 10 minutes later, a pickup pulled into the driveway, tires biting down through the snow and stopping near the porch. It was the guy from the hardware store door. He stepped out and said, "You called Ken?" I said we tried. He said he was Ken's cousin. "I can pull you out if you want to bail," he said, which told me people bailed. I asked what he meant. He leaned on his truck, looked at the cabin and said, "Midweek is cheaper for a reason." He didn't explain, and I didn't push, because there's a way locals talk when they've decided you aren't going to believe them, and you have to prove yourself first. We said we'd stick it out, and he shrugged and said to knock if we needed anything and drove off. Leah watched. His taillights vanished behind lifted snow. "I hate the way some people hold information like a biscuit," she said. "Break me off a piece if you're going to insinuate." We tried to be normal. We watched a dumb movie on my laptop until the battery died. We made grilled cheese and burned one and ate it anyway. We didn't look toward the drawer where the book was. The woodpile was getting lower. I went out with a headlamp to grab more, and the beam picked out the water ring prints on the porch railing like little coins. Then, behind me, the interior latch clicked again. I froze and listened to the wind paw at the trees and the cabin breathe. When I went back in, Leah was standing just inside the door with her hands tucked into her sleeves like she was cold. The guest book was on the kitchen table. "What did you do?" she asked. I didn't touch it. We hadn't left the bedroom door open. The drawer still had the blankets in it, disturbed. The guest book sat planted in the middle of the table, like a centerpiece. It was open to the page where I had written our names, and it had added detail. Our last initial, which I hadn't written, and Leah's middle name, which I hadn't even told the host. Under it, again in that composed hand, the words, "Leave." The door unlatched. We went too far in the other direction then. We treated it like a dare. I took painter's tape from the junk drawer and taped the book shut and across, and then wrapped the strap around it and put it under the bench this time. I moved the bench into the bedroom and leaned it against the wall with a stack of firewood on top. It felt ridiculous and made me feel better. Leah said, "You're making it personal." And I said, "It got personal when it started knowing things about us." At 3:17, the click woke me with the neat precision of a pin dropping. It was so exact I could have set a watch. There was no wind sound at that moment, like the night was holding its breath. The door latch clicked once, didn't open, clicked again, settled. Something slid on the kitchen counter with a sound like a key knuckling across wood. I got out of bed with the kind of caution you save for unfamiliar staircases. Leah grabbed my sleeve and whispered my name. The cabin had that strained stillness of a place listening to itself. The bench was still against the bedroom wall. The stack of firewood still sat on top. The tape was still wrapped around the book under the bench, except it wasn't. The book lay open on the table, tape neatly cut like you'd slice a ribbon. The strap was unthreaded. The page said, in that same hand, "We left, we're leaving, we will leave." And below that, like a little kindness, "Please." Leah said, "We're going to go." Not then, in the morning. In the morning when there was light and Ken or his cousin could pull us out. We sat on the couch with our coats on and the blankets around our legs and waited for the night to move. The stove whispered. I kept feeling like there was a third person in the room who was very polite and very insistent. Once, from the direction of the porch, we heard what I would say was footsteps if that didn't sound like a cliché. It didn't sound human. It sounded like snow finding its way into its own footprints. We must have slept because I woke to light so pale it barely counted as day. We packed in 10 minutes. We left the towels in a heap, which I never do because I am a rule follower in Airbnb auditoriums. I put the keys on the counter where the host had said to leave them, and they slid an inch on their own and stopped. Leah saw it. We didn't talk about it then. We put the guest book back under the bench on principle and didn't look at it again. We tried the driveway and the car made it halfway and dug down to ice. We were two people who go to the gym and pretend to like hiking, and we were not going to get out on our own. I called Ken again, and this time it rang. He said he'd be there in 20, which was 45, and he hooked a chain to our car and pulled it like it was a toy. While he worked, he asked how our stay was, and I said, "We're checking out early." And he said, "Folks usually do by Thursday." He said it very normally. We drove away without looking back because I didn't want the picture of the cabin getting small in the rear view to be the picture I have in my head. The town felt different in daylight. B was sweeping salt off the hardware store step. I ran in and bought another pair of gloves I didn't need because I wanted the act of buying to move time forward. B said, "You all right?" And I said yes out of habit, and she nodded once like that was an answer. On the way home, the highway felt like it was pulling us. We didn't talk much, but when we did, it was about stupid things like what if we got a bigger French press? We both avoid superstition, and we had something in the back seat we weren't naming. We cleaned the car at the gas station on the edge of the city, and the snow on the bumper came off in one sheet like peeling paint. That night, after the shower and the relief of our own bed, I plugged my phone in and saw a message from Elliot at 3:18 a.m. the night before. "Safe travels. Thanks for leaving the space as you found it. The platform must do automated messages, but the timing made me feel watched again." I typed, "We left early. Please check the door latch," and then deleted it and typed, "Thanks for having us." He never replied. I wasn't going to develop the disposable camera. It was a dumb retro thing we brought to force ourselves to take fewer photos and think about them. It had 15 shots left when we got there, and I used it to take pictures of Leah by the stove, the lake through the window, the smoke spinning out of the chimney. I dropped it at the pharmacy because that was the routine, and I like routines. When I picked up the little packet, the clerk slid it to me like it was any other day. The first few prints were bad on purpose. Grainy and a little blue. Leah half turned, smiling into steam. The deck railing with coins of frost. The stove door cracked and orange like a mouth. I turned one over and the back had the lab's date, stamped on it, and something in faint pencil I didn't remember writing. It said 317, and I told myself it was a smudge until I saw the rest. There was a photo of us asleep. I say it straightforward because that's how it presented itself. The angle was from the doorway to the bedroom. You could see the bed, the blankets in a heap, the corner of the dresser. You could see my shoulder and Leah's hair over her face, and our arms in that awkward overlap that looks sweet in movies and uncomfortable in real life. The clock on the dresser, which I hadn't noticed before, had its pale digits showing 317. The door behind whoever took the photo was open a few inches. The guest book was on the floor by the bench, the tape neat on the cover. The strap hung, like a tongue. In the lower corner of the frame, there was a blur that I could not decide was a thumb or something like breath captured as a shape. I stared at it long enough that the paper went soft in my hands. I did not show Leah that night. I tucked it back into the packet and put it inside a book on the shelf, which I know is what people do when they don't want an object to exist. The next day I showed her, because not showing someone you live with is its own kind of lie, and we were trying to stop those. She looked at the picture for a long time without talking, and then she said, "Where is the guest book now?" I told her where I put it in the cabin, and she said, "Not that. Here." I told her it wasn't here and watched her shoulders come down a notch. We reported the listing to the platform under unsafe conditions because it was the only category that fit, and because checking a box feels like action. The listing disappeared 2 days later. It didn't say suspended or unavailable. It was just gone, as if the place had never been for rent. A week after we got back, a letter came to our apartment without a return address. It was addressed to both of us by first name and last initial. It was postmarked from the town near the lake. Inside, no stationery, just a torn piece of paper that looked like it came from a ledger. The paper was the right color. The ink was that same slow black. The handwriting was neat. It said, "Thank you for leaving the door unlatched. I didn't sleep much that night." People say this in stories, but I did the thing where you watch the shadows learn the shapes of your furniture, and you measure time by traffic patterns through the blinds. Around 3, I got up to get water and stopped in the hallway because our apartment was making the kind of small sounds places make when they are settling, and I was listening to see if any of them sounded like a latch. I'm aware that it reads like a chain of coincidences tied together by someone's anxiety. I know a fountain pen and a trickster host and a hidden camera can do a lot. I know you can cut tape neatly without leaving a mess if you're careful. I know an automatic message can go out at exactly the wrong moment, and an old hardware clerk can look like she knows something when she just knows snow. I also know the feeling of being asked politely to obey by something that is not human, and feeling how you start to obey, because politeness is the ground we stand on. We have a new rule we don't talk about out loud. We lock every door all the way, even the ones inside the house. We don't leave things unlatched. We don't sign guest books. If there's one, I put a grocery list on top of it so the paper knows it's not in charge. When we travel, we check the drawers, not for valuables, but for books with straps. We ask ourselves if we are staying until morning, and then we stay until morning, because so far nothing strange has insisted on day. Sometimes I think about the page that said, "We left, we're leaving, we will leave," and I think about the way tenses stack like footprints in snow, past on top of present on top of future. I think about the way the pen moved like it knew my name better than I do. I think about the picture of us sleeping and how small we look in it, and how the door behind the lens is just a little open, and how there is not a single print in the snow on the deck. I think about the way the lake sounded, like something big turning over and settling again a little closer to the surface. We don't talk about it much. When we do, Leah says, in a voice that is solid like a boot on ice, "It wanted us to go, and we went. That's the end of it." I nod, and I do. Not say that endings are a kind of wish. Sometimes at 3:17 the radiator ticks and the refrigerator hums, and I think I hear a page turn. Then I hear nothing. Then I sleep. Then I wake and the door is still latched and the day comes with its ordinary lists. I choose to believe that matters. I don't care if you don't believe me. This is how it happened. If you ever go to a neat little place by a lake in winter and find a leather book with a strap and a pen that bleeds ink into thick paper, and the first page asks for your memories, write nothing, or write your name, and then close it and latch it and put something heavy on top. Or leave it alone and go to bed and set your alarm for 3:16 and wait. Not to catch anything, not to prove a point, just to listen. You'll know if there's someone else there by how polite the room feels, by how insistently kind the request is, by how your hand moves to the door without you meaning to. If you don't move, if you stay still and let the night pass you like weather, you might hear a page turn anyway. You might hear it make a note of your patience. You might be counted among the entries that never get written, because obeying quietly is a way of leaving too. I don't believe in haunted houses. I believe in bad plumbing, old wood, and owners who don't want to admit their place creaks like a ship. That's the head I was in when my girlfriend, Maya, found a cheap weekend rental in a century-old townhouse, walking distance from the historic district. The listing stressed that it was a single-floor unit with no attic access, which made me laugh. Who asks to access an attic on vacation? It was November, cold enough that our breath showed when we got out of the rideshare. The block was a line of narrow brick row houses, bay windows like folded elbows. A couple of blue recycling bins tipped over in the wind. Our unit was the ground floor of a skinny townhouse sandwiched between a bodega and a law office with gold lettering on the glass. The host's name was Danielle. She'd messaged a code and said, "Older building, please be gentle with the deadbolt." Inside, it smelled like clean detergent and old dust, the way museums smell if you stick your nose in a curtain. The place was nicer than I expected. Long hallway, 12-foot ceilings, a living room with a fireplace that had been sealed, a galley kitchen, a little bedroom at the back. There were framed prints of the city like the ones you can buy from street vendors and a laminated binder with house rules. The second page had that line again, no attic access. I showed it to Maya and rolled my eyes. She told me to stop being a jerk and help with the bags. We were in town to see my college friend Lucas play a small show. Maya hadn't met him yet, and she was already braced for the mess that is every musician's life. We unpacked, argued about whether the couch throw belonged on the couch or over the chair, then put on coats to go find dinner. On our way out, we ran into the neighbor from upstairs in the shared entryway. She was in scrubs, a woman in her 50s, with tired eyes and a coffee thermos. "You folks the weekend guests?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "We're not too loud." She smiled without much humor. "It's an old building. Everything sounds like it's in your pocket. You hear something, it's probably me or the pipes." She pushed out into the cold. The door closed. I told Maya, "See? Pipes. We did a whole evening of being tourists. Too much food, an extra dessert because the waiter said the bread pudding was famous, a long walk down a street of little shops. When we got back, we were heavy and lazy. I brushed my teeth and watched a patch of ceiling crack around the bathroom light fixture. The plaster had those hairline spiderwebs you get when the building moves a fraction of an inch over 100 years. We got into bed. The rental had that cheap mattress that's too soft and too short. Where your feet hit the footboard, I drifted, off to the sound of the radiator clicking itself awake. Around 2 a.m., something woke me. Footsteps. I lay there holding my breath, and there it was again, a slow pace above us. Heel to toe, back and forth, like someone walking from one side of the ceiling to the other. Not a squirrel scramble, not a pipe ping, actual weight, with pauses. The pattern would stop, then start again, then stop, like someone was pacing and thinking. I told myself it was the upstairs neighbor. I told myself the ceiling was thin. But the upstairs neighbor was front and back from us, and the sound wasn't offset. It was direct, over our heads, right above the bedroom. Maya stirred. "Babe," she whispered without opening her eyes. Do you hear that? Yeah. She opened her eyes. Is that upstairs? Has to be. We listened. The pacing stopped. The radiator hissed. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. I could feel Maya's fingers find my forearm under the blankets. Just a light touch. Old building, I said, because saying it felt like doing something. She closed her eyes again, and I lay there and stared up, waiting for the noise. When it didn't come back, I half convinced myself it hadn't happened. I fell asleep eventually. In the morning, sunlight through the blind slats, we pretended we'd slept fine. Maya made coffee in the little French press. I went out to the bodega and came back with bagels and a magazine. The upstairs neighbor's door remained closed. I could hear the faint sound of a TV and a kettle. I kept thinking about the footsteps while we ate. The ceiling had a line of vents set high along the hallway wall, old rectangular grates with too many coats of paint on them. I stood on a dining chair and unscrewed one of the grates. Maya told me to quit it. Behind the slats, there was a dark space and insulation that looked like gray cotton candy. I held my phone's flashlight up. A cobweb moved in the draft like a jellyfish tentacle, and I got a face full of dust, which helped me climb back down. Happy? Maya asked. Yep, I said, coughing, eyes watering. We went out to a farmer's market and bought apples that tasted like actual apples. We met Lucas at a coffee shop, and I did the introduction thing, over-explaining that he and I used to share a dorm room and that he'd once saved me from failing calculus by doing something with variables that still made my head spin. He hugged Maya and said he was grateful to finally meet the person who made me calm. He looked older and leaner and happier than the last time I saw him. At some point, Maya told him about the footsteps. Lucas leaned back in his chair and grinned. My uncle lived in a house with a cockloft, he said. That's like a crawl space between the ceiling and the roof. You can't stand up in it, but you can scoot. He said the firemen hated those because fires get in there and race across the block. It's a single-floor unit, I said. There's no attic. Cockloft, he repeated and wiggled his eyebrows. Also, it's probably pipes. We laughed. It felt good to laugh about it. It was daylight, and everything creepy is smaller in daylight. Lucas had sound check. We went back to the rental to nap. When we walked in, the hallway felt colder than the rest. The radiators were clicking, but there was a little draft that made the hairs on my arm stand up. I checked the windows. All latched. Maya lay down and was asleep in 5 minutes. I sat on the edge of the bed and checked email, then gave up and closed my eyes. I woke up the second time the same way, like I'd been tapped on the shoulder. The room was bluish and dim, pacing, slow, measured, back and forth. The sound came, with this faint, dry scrape, as if grit were being ground under a shoe. My mouth went brittle. I looked at the ceiling and saw nothing but white paint in the gloom. Maya whispered, "It's not upstairs." I know. We listened. The gate changed, a few steps faster, then a pause, another pause, then a longer silence, which was somehow worse. I took out my phone and opened the voice memo app. I felt stupid and also like I needed proof. I held the phone up and hit record. After a long 15 seconds, it came back. 4 steady steps, like someone moving a short distance and stopping. In my hand, the phone recorded the thumps with a little clipping, the microphone saturating. I stopped the recording and played it back. Hearing it through a speaker made it worse. It removed all the doubt. "Text the host," Maya said. Danielle replied in under a minute. "Totally understand. The building is quirky. Our upstairs neighbor sometimes moves around a lot during the day because she works nights. You might hear dudes on the roof sometimes, too. Contractors are patching a leak on the bodega side." I typed back, "This is above the bedroom, not on the roof, and it's not next door. It sounds like it's in the ceiling." "Older building," she wrote. "Sound travels in weird ways. I promise there's no attic. The roof is flat with tar. Nothing up there but pigeons and heat. I didn't know if I wanted to push it." I sent her the clip. She responded, "I hear it. That's spooky. I'll check with upstairs. Let me know if it keeps happening." We had to leave for the show. In the Uber, Maya put her head on my shoulder and didn't say anything. The venue was loud, Lucas was good, a slice of night I could have kept living in. When we came back around midnight, the shared entryway smelled like someone had microwaved fish. There were footsteps on the stairs going up, deliberate and human. The upstairs neighbor was coming home. When we saw her, she had dark circles and a tote full of Tupperware. She nodded. We nodded. Inside our unit, everything was fine for 15 minutes. We brushed our teeth, got into bed, scrolled our phones. Then the pacing started again. I sat up. So did Maya. Okay, she said. We're not doing this. I got up and went into the hallway. I stood under one of the vent grates and listened. The footsteps were clearer here. Something about the shape of the hall amplified them. I went to the kitchen and pulled the step stool from under the sink. I set it under the grate and climbed up, fingers numb with adrenaline. The screws were stripped. The paint had glued the metal to the wall. I used the butter knife. The grate came away with a pop and a flurry of dust. The gap behind was a rectangular, opening into darkness. I put my face near it and smelled dry wood and old insulation, and under that, something else, faint and sour, like old sweat in fabric. My heart pounded. I lifted my phone, turned the flashlight on, and aimed it into the void. The beam lit a little shelf of joists and gray fluff. Beyond the first bay was more darkness. The footprint of the hallway ran all the way front to back. If there was a cockloft, this was it. Maybe 10 inches high between our plaster and the roof, maybe a foot. You could scoot if you were skinny. You could crawl if you were desperate. The footsteps stopped. The silence fell into the gap between us like a held breath. Maya called softly from the bedroom. Evan. The first bang made me drop the phone. It was heavy, sudden, a slam on the plaster so direct the light fixture shook. The phone clunked onto the step stool. Maya yelped. I jumped down, almost falling, and grabbed her hand. We backed into the bedroom like people backing away from an animal. The bang came again, and with it a dry whisper of dust sifting down, peppering my hair and shoulders. Then there was a scratching sound, not at the vent, but inside the ceiling, like something trying to find a new place to push. We looked at each other, every expression gone. I called the host. No answer. I texted, "Someone is in the ceiling." Danielle wrote back a minute later, "I'm calling the neighbor. Stay put. I'm sending my property guy, Gus, 20 minutes. Maya put on her shoes with shaking hands. "We're waiting outside." We went into the shared entryway, coats over pajamas. The night air slapped my face awake. The street was mostly empty. The bodega on the corner was closing. The security gate rattled down. While we stood there, the upstairs neighbor came down the stairs. She blinked at us. "You okay? Can you hear footsteps above our unit?" I asked, sounding exactly as crazy as I felt. She frowned. "There's no unit above you." "Yeah," I said. "We know." She looked past us into our hallway, then up at the plaster. "When I moved in, the super said the roofline runs weird. They flattened it in the 70s and left a crawl space. Nobody goes up there. The hatch is on the roof over the stairwell, but it's sealed. Fire code, I think. Have you ever heard?" "I hear everything," she said. "I wear earbuds. You should too." Gus pulled up in a pickup that had seen better jobs. He was in a hoodie and work pants and a knit cap. He had that resigned face of someone who has already decided we're the problem, but will fix the problem anyway, because it's his job. The host must have warned him we were skittish, because he came in soft, saying our names a lot, making his body language slow and loose. He looked at the vents. He looked at the ceiling. He stood still and listened. Of course, the footsteps had stopped. He said, "I can take a look from the roof. If somebody has been monkeying with the hatch, I'll know." He took a ring of keys and a flashlight and asked the upstairs neighbor, "You got your fire escape key?" She did. The three of them went up together while I stood in the doorway with Maya and tried not to admit that I was waiting to hear the bang again. It didn't come. 20 minutes. Later they came back down, boots dusty, cheeks pink from the wind. Hatches painted shut, caulked and screwed. Gus said, "Ain't nobody going in there without a cordless driver and a prayer. The roof is solid. Pigeons everywhere, but no signs of an encampment. You hear moving? It's the tar warming and cooling. It was at night, I said. Tar holds heat, he said, as if that explained anything. Look, I'm not saying you didn't hear something, but there's nothing up there that can move around like a person. Back inside, the neighbor gave us a look that said she was going to regret this conversation at 3 in the morning. Maybe you hit a weird pressure change with the vents, she said. It can sound footsteppy. Footsteppy, Maya repeated. Flat. Gus reattached the vent grate I'd pried off and told me gently not to go prying things off in old buildings. He wrote his number on a card and told us to call him, even if it was dumb. He said, I've had raccoons that sounded like Navy SEALs. We thanked them and locked our door and sat on the couch with our coats still on. I felt foolish and childish and wired. It took an hour for our pulse to come down. We went back to bed. We stared at the ceiling long enough for the plaster to become a map of continents. The radiator clicked. Maya's breathing slowed. I was a minute from sleep when something slid in the hallway. A long drag like fabric pulled across a rough board. Then the pacing again, deliberate and steady. I was done being reasonable. I went to the kitchen and got the broom. I took the step. Stool under the vent. I didn't take off the grate this time. I pushed the broom handle through the slats and into the dark space and prodded hard. Don't, Maya said, but I was past listening. The broom handle hit something soft. Not insulation, not wood. It compressed and then bounced. It felt like the corner of a mattress. It felt like a rolled sleeping bag. The sound that came back was a quick scuttle and then the tiniest hum like a breath sucked between teeth. I jerked the broom out and fell backward so hard I knocked the stool over. We left. No dramatic plan. No second pass at courage. Maya shoved her feet into boots without socks and grabbed her tote, and we left. We texted Lucas and said we needed a couch. He wrote back, always, like a good friend. The next day, after coffee on a different couch under a different ceiling, Danielle called with a flurry of apologies. She said Gus hadn't found anything, but she'd comp a night and send a cleaning crew in, and would we mind if she checked our bags when we swung by to grab the rest? Because housekeeping had lost a set of hand towels last month and she was now paranoid. I told her we had left the hand towels alone, thanks. She went quiet, then said, Okay, I'm sorry. She sounded tired. She said she'd had a run of weird guests lately. She asked if we could meet back at the unit at noon. When we got there, the front door was open and the smell was bleach and lemon. A woman in pink gloves was inside scrubbing the baseboards. Gus was there too, arms crossed, looking like he'd lost an argument and now had to be nice about it. Danielle arrived last. She was younger than I'd pictured, early 30s, hair in a messy bun. She looked around with a host's eyes, all scanning and mental checklists. Show me where, she said. I took them to the hallway vent. Gus crouched and shined his flashlight through the slats. Nothing, he said. Insulation, joists, plaster backer. Push a broom in, I said. He did. He prodded around. He hit nothing this time but wood. He shrugged like a magician, revealing an empty hat. The cleaner, who had kept her head down during all this, stood up and said, Excuse me, and pointed at the bedroom. You want me to do the closet? Please, Danielle said. The cleaner opened the closet and made a small sound. For a second, nobody moved, because the sound wasn't fear. It was surprise, the kind of noise you make when you find a lost earring. She reached up to the top shelf and pulled down a folded blanket. It was one of those moving blankets, gray with blue edging. Underneath it was a flattened cardboard box. Under that, a rolled-up piece of black rubber mat. Leave that, Gus said, oddly sharp. Danielle looked at him. He looked back. There was an argument happening without words. Gus, she said. It's just junk, he said. He put on gloves and pulled the mat down himself. The top shelf underneath was scuffed, like something had been slid in and out a lot. He set the mat on the floor and unrolled it. Under the rolled mat was a key. Not a house key. A little square of metal with 2 holes, like the kind you might use for a utility box. The cleaner and Danielle both looked at it like it was a snake. What's that to? I asked. Gus said, "Could be anything. Gas meter. Roof hatch." "Roof hatch," Maya said quietly. We all looked up without meaning to. The ceiling was just a ceiling. Danielle's jaw set. "Let's go upstairs," she said. The upstairs neighbor let us through again. We went up the last flight to the roof door, which had a padlock. Gus used 2 different keys before he sighed and held up the little utility key we'd found. It slid in like it had been waiting. He turned it and the padlock popped open. My stomach dropped. Maya's hand found mine. Gus opened the door and we went out into cold gray wind. The roof was a patchwork of black tar and patches of roll roofing. Pigeons clattered away. The hatch over the stairwell wasn't a separate structure. It was a square of plywood and flashing, set into the roof itself, painted the same as everything else. The screws were paint-filled and old. Gus set his tool bag down, knelt, and began to work them loose with mechanical patience. Danielle crouched beside him and tried not to look at the 2 of us. The upstairs neighbor stayed back with her arms crossed, her expression already bored, like nothing good ever came of this many people on a roof. The 4th screw came out with a squeal. Gus levered the hatch up with a pry bar. Tar cracked. The smell that came out wasn't rot. It was human, old laundry, skin, a hint of food. The space beneath wasn't big enough to stand up in, just a dark, horizontal volume between roof and plaster, ribbed with joists. Gus aimed his flashlight and the beam cut across. There was a narrow plywood platform laid across 2 joists like a shelf. On it, 2 rolled sleeping bags, a milk crate with cans, a plastic jug of water, a bundle of clothes tied with string, and a small stack of notebooks. There was also a hand mirror and a pair of binoculars. From this platform ran a small track of compressed insulation where someone had scooted back and forth many times. At intervals, little holes had been punched gently through the plaster backer and then patched neatly with tape or painted over from below. One hole, not bigger than a pencil, sat directly over where our bed would be. Nobody spoke. Wind moved across the roof like an animal. Gus swore under his breath. Danielle's face went white. The upstairs neighbor said, "Jesus," not like a prayer, but like a verdict. Danielle said, "I swear I didn't." "Gus, did you know?" He shook his head, emphatic. "No, I patched leaks. I didn't open hatches. You told me not to." Liability, yeah. Notebooks were composition books, the kind kids use, marbled black and white. Gus reached for one and Danielle said sharply, "Don't." But he had already opened it. His eyes scanned a page and then he closed it carefully and set it down like it was a baby. Danielle said again, quieter, "Don't." Maya asked, "What did it say?" Gus didn't answer. He took out his phone and dialed. "We're calling. The police," he said. "Now." A hard 20 minutes followed where Danielle tried to figure out if this was going to ruin her life. She spoke in tight little loops to herself about permits and leases and who had keys. The upstairs neighbor smoked and offered me one, and I took it even though I don't smoke, because it gave my hands something to do. Maya didn't let go of my hand. At one point she said very softly, "We slept under that." 2 squad cars rolled up, and then there were uniforms on the roof talking to Gus and Danielle, and then to us. We told the story. A detective came, the kind of man who wears a tie like it's a weapon. He spoke with the cool voice of someone who has had every argument already. He looked at the platform and the notebooks and the little hand mirror and nodded like it was all part of a pattern he recognized. He asked Danielle for a list of keys and contractors. He asked the upstairs neighbor about noises. He asked us to send him the audio clip. He told us to go back downstairs and wait while they documented the scene. We did. We stood in our hallway, while a policeman we hadn't met stood by our door like a bouncer. The cleaner sat on the couch and texted furiously. Danielle kept saying, "I'm sorry," and then, "I didn't know," like a stuck record. Gus leaned against the wall and said nothing. Eventually, the detective came down with a bag of the notebooks and a roll of tape that had been used to cover holes. He took our statement again, as if rehearsing, and said we could collect our things. Danielle offered to refund us fully and pay for a hotel. She said she was going to suspend the listing until she got it all sorted. We left. We went to Lucas's again. We slept under his leaky ceiling, and it was the best sleep I've ever had. You think the story ends there? It doesn't. Because here is the part that sits with me in the grocery store and on the train and when the house creaks at 4 in the morning. A week later, out of habit or curiosity or something worse, I pulled up the listing again. I wanted to see if it was gone. It wasn't. It was still up, but the photos were changed. The bedroom was now staged differently. The bed moved to the other wall. The line about no attic access was gone. In its place was a line about historic quirks. The price was lower by $20 a night. The host name was still Danielle. The first review at the top was from a profile with no photo, posted the day after we left. It said, "Great location. Some noise at night. Bring earplugs." I showed Maya without saying anything. Her face went slack like a cord with the power cut. "Call the detective," she said. I did. He answered. He remembered me. He said they had found signs someone had been living up there on and off for months, maybe years, using the hatch Gus opened. He said whoever it was had probably developed a rhythm, figuring out when guests were out and when they were asleep. He said they found a little bell hung on a string that would jingle if the hatch moved, and that makes me sicker than anything. He said the notebooks had lists of dates and names pulled from luggage tags or mail on the hall table, a grocery list that included the exact brand of coffee we bought, and pages of what looked like listening. Not conversations, just notes like, "Woman hums in kitchen" and "Man snores louder when wind." He said there were no names for us. That part still bothers me. It was like we didn't rank enough to be recorded, or we were being saved for later. The detective said they didn't find the person. He said it could have been a squatter, a contractor, a former tenant, someone making use of access. He said, "The platforms in these old houses link under the roofs sometimes, and you can go house to house if you know where to push." He said they posted warnings to the block. He said to keep our vent grates screwed and to put a little tape over holes, and check the tape in the morning. I asked him if Danielle was in trouble. He said she was cooperating. He said it's hard to prove what someone knows or doesn't know about what's above their head. We didn't leave a review. We don't stay in ground floor units anymore. 2 nights ago, I was in our new apartment, not that old, steel studs and a fire suppression system, everything up to code. I woke at 3:17 because the heat came on and made the ducts click. I lay there in the dark and listened and told myself it was nothing. Then I heard it, soft and patient and almost tender. A heel-to-toe pace, 4 steps, a pause, 4 steps back. It wasn't above me exactly. It was past the wall or under, or in a place that made no sense. It went on for a while, like someone laying out the edges of a room. I didn't wake Maya. She slept with one hand open on the blanket, palm up, like she was passing something to someone, and it had been accepted and the deal was done. I lay there and watched our ceiling in the streetlight, our modern, smooth plasterboard ceiling that I've touched with my own hands. In the morning, I went to the vent and put a strip of tape over the slit. It was intact today. It will be intact tomorrow. It will probably always be intact. That's not the part that gets you. The part that gets you is how the sound had a personality. The upstairs neighbor was all rush tiredness. The contractor was all practical irritation. This was neither. This felt like waiting. It felt like someone who had lived in rooms above, rooms for so long that patience had become the only language. It felt like a person usefully filling a day in a place you forget exists. Once you start listening to the space between your ceiling and the sky, you can't unhear it. There are a lot of places in old buildings where a person can fit. There are a lot of places in new ones too, it turns out, if you know how to move. People call it haunted because haunted feels less personal than trespassed. It lets you sleep. It lets you roll over and tell yourself it's the pipes. If you ever stay in a place with high ceilings and vents set low and a listing that insists there's no attic, do this for me. Stand quietly in the hallway at 2 in the morning and listen. Hear the building breathe. If you hear footsteps, think about the length of them. Think about the rhythm. Think about how someone learns a house from the wrong side, where the bed is, where you set your keys. The sound you make when you think no one can hear you. Someone will probably tell you it's the tar on the roof. Nod. Go back to bed. Put a piece of tape over a vent and laugh at yourself. In the morning, you'll check it, and it will be fine. You'll tell yourself you're being dramatic. You'll leave a review about how the location was great. Maybe you'll suggest earplugs. Maybe you'll carry that small, sour smell with you for a while and never connect it to anything. Or maybe, like me, you'll wake again weeks later in a different place and hear those 4 steps measure out the dark. And you'll know that a person can learn to pace anywhere, even in a space so small you have to scoot. You'll know that patience is a kind of door. And you will lie there listening. Because you won't want to move. Because moving will make the person above you stop. And it is somehow worse when they stop. I didn't pick the place because it was cheap. I picked it because the host had the kind of reviews that made you feel safe before you even clicked book. "Hal is the kindest human I've ever met," one said. He greeted us with warm cookies and left a handwritten map to the swimming hole. Another said, "Don't let the drive scare you. Worth it. 5 stars. Hal went above and beyond." The listing was called Hill Country Hideaway near Canyon Lake, just off Devil's Backbone. The photos were sunlit and honest. Cedar posts, a screened porch, a chipped blue porch swing, a deer feeder in the background. It felt like visiting a favorite uncle you never had. There were 4 of us, me, my girlfriend Kayla, my sister Jess, and our friend Miguel. We had a long weekend, a cooler full of HEB stuff, and a plan to hike, swim, and do nothing else. We left San Antonio after work, hit Buc-ee's in New Braunfels, and turned west as dusk folded into that purple Texas dark where the sky looks close enough to touch. Our phones lost bars one by one until only mine hung on a single dot with the map half loaded. The directions in the Airbnb app were exact in that annoyingly folksy way hosts sometimes write. "You'll pass a rusted windmill and a cattle guard with a missing slat," the app message said. "Turn left where the live oak leans like it's tired. If you hit the water tower, you went too far. Gate code is 1977. Welcome home." That message had come through exactly 1 minute after I'd asked for check-in instructions. "Thanks, Hal," I'd typed. He'd liked it with a little thumbs-up reaction. His profile picture was a man in his 60s, tan and round-faced, wearing a straw hat and a shirt with pearl snaps. He looked like every friendly hill country dad you see drinking coffee at a feed store. We found the gate with the drooping oak. The keypad took the code and clicked as if relieved. The driveway wound through cedar and limestone outcrops, white rock dust puffing under our tires. Right away there was the smell I always forget until I'm out there. Juniper, dust, and something like warm metal. We passed a dark shape that turned into 3 deer frozen by the headlights. The house appeared after a bend, ranch style with a deep porch. In the beam of our car lights, dust danced like small ash. The porch light was on, the kind of warm yellow that makes the night feel friendly. On the door, a little sign said, "Welcome, y'all," burned into wood. There was a keypad on the front door, too. I typed 1977, and the deadbolt drew back with a mechanical sigh. Inside, it smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. To the right was a living room with a braided rug and a couch with hand-stitched pillows. To the left, a small kitchen with old cabinets painted white and a bowl of pecans in the center. On the table sat a plate covered in plastic wrap. Under it were 4 cookies, oatmeal raisin. "Okay, that's a little creepy," Jess said. "He knows there are 4 of us?" "I told him in the message," I said, but that wasn't true. I hadn't. I just added guests in the reservation. I decided I must have mentioned it weeks before when I first booked. It felt like a stretch, but it was something to say. Kayla peeled back the wrap and sniffed. "They smell fresh." Miguel was at the thermostat twisting the dial. It said on 72 like a museum. There was a binder on the counter with house manual on the front in block letters. The first page had a friendly note. "Howdy, friends. If you're reading this, you made it safe. Your family here. My granddad built this place and I keep it the way he would like. If you need anything, shoot me a message in the app or call the landline on the wall. I'm usually out back until dark. Don't worry if you hear coyotes. They mind their business." Hal, the landline was one of those cream-colored wall phones with a coiled cord. It was mounted near the back door, and when Kayla lifted the receiver to test it, there was a faint dial tone that had a hum-like distance. Neighbor's porch light flicked on and off somewhere through the trees. The back porch looked out on a dark yard, and beyond was just more dark. The moon was a thin white thing over the oaks. It was quiet in that sudden, soft way where you can hear your blood moving and the small insect sounds fill the gaps. We decided to unpack and make tacos. We were halfway through browning the meat when the back porch light clicked on by itself. It was one of those motion sensor floods. A raccoon, we said, or a deer. Miguel stepped out onto the porch with his phone light. I followed him. The yard was a flat patch of pale caliche, a bird bath, a ring of stones around an old live oak, and a tool shed near the fence. The porch flood turned itself off, then on again as if it was thinking about it. We ate at the table under the yellow light. I took a bite of a cookie. It tasted homemade, soft at the center like it had been baked that afternoon. I told myself a cleaner had left them. Maybe Hal ran this like a bed and breakfast from a distance. He had that kind of reviews. Maybe he hired someone. After dishes, we opened a second beer and went out on the porch. The sky was bigger when the house lights were behind you. Jess and Miguel argued about whether the Milky Way is visible in July. We heard coyotes, high and quick. After a while, we said goodnight and split up to rooms. The house had 3 bedrooms. Kayla and I took the one with the view of the yard. I'm the kind of person who sleeps well in other people's houses, but it took me a while to find a comfortable spot. It wasn't the bed. It was the quiet. The central air had that whispery fan sound, and every 20 minutes or so a click somewhere would make my brain say, "What was that?" Around 2 in the morning I woke because I heard footsteps on the porch. Not heavy, not boots. Soft steps like someone in socks. I lay still and listened. Kayla breathed slow beside me. The steps went past the window, across the boards, then stopped. The motion light came on and made a rectangle on the curtains, then went off. When I finally worked up the nerve to move, I stood and pulled the curtain back a hair with one finger. The yard glowed bluish. Nobody there. The tool shed was a dark block. The porch rail cast stripes. I told myself it was an armadillo. They shuffle around and sound like a person when you want them to. I got back in bed and eventually dropped under again. In the morning, we took the house manual out on the porch with coffee. There were laminated pages with rules and recommendations. Don't put bones down the sink. The best swimming hole is at the end of River Road. Avoid stepping on the ant mounds hidden in the grass. A page with the Wi-Fi password, another with emergency numbers, and a page with local friends and some names and phone numbers in blue pen. Over the years, it looked like people had added notes and smiley faces. One name, Ray, next door, had a little star. We were about to head into Wimberley for breakfast when a silver Tacoma pulled up at the end of the drive. A man in his 70s stepped out wearing a feed store cap and waved from the gate like he was being polite about not coming in uninvited. "Howdy," he called. I walked down the steps and waved back. "Morning." He looked past me, scanning the porch like he expected to see someone. "You kids with Hal?" "We're guests," I said, half laughing. "I'm Tyler." The man touched the brim of his cap. "Ray, I'm across the fence. If you need anything, holler." "Thanks, Ray," I said. "Hey, do you know if Hal is around? We weren't sure if he lives here full time." Ray looked at me a long second like he was trying to decide whether to say a thing you can't unsay. "No, son," he said. "He passed." I thought he meant he had just driven by. I didn't get it. "He passed by?" "Passed away," Ray said. 3 years now. Cancer. I smiled the way you do when you're sure you misheard. "I'm sorry," I said. "But we've been messaging him. In the app." Ray looked toward the house, then at the trees. "I tried to get them to pull that listing down," he said. "People keep showing up. Some say it's fine, some say it's not. What does that mean?" Ray looked older suddenly, in that way faces get when they think of hospitals and paperwork. "I can't stop you from staying," he said. "Just don't go in the shed." He waved again and left like a man who had done what he believed his duty required and was finished. I went back up to the porch where Kayla and Jess and Miguel were waiting. Jess raised her eyebrows at me. "What did Grandpa Cryptic say?" "Hal's dead," I said. We laughed. We all laughed. Kayla laughed until she looked at my face and stopped. "Like for real dead?" "Ray says 3 years," I said. "Cancer." Miguel was already on his phone. "But who is answering messages?" He scrolled and scrolled through the app. "Dude, the last reply came at 11 last night." Kayla set her coffee down carefully like it was heavy. "Tyler, we slept in a dead guy's house and ate a dead guy's cookies." "Cleanup crew," I said, but hearing it outside my mouth made it thinner. "We did what you do when something is wrong, but not yet wrong enough to ruin a vacation." We went to breakfast. We walked around Wimberley Square and bought a candle that said Mesquite Morning. We swam at the river and let the cold close over our shoulders. We talked about Hal like we were telling a friend about a weird YouTube video. We didn't go back until the sun had moved off the yard, and the porch shadows were long, and the trees had that rusty summer rattle. There was a note on the doormat when we got back, a folded index card. On it, a ballpoint pen in a man's hand. "Don't forget checkout is 10 a.m. No exceptions on Sundays. Please strip beds." HI went straight to the app and typed, "Hey Hal, this might be a weird question, but Ray said you passed away a while back. I'm assuming a family member is co-hosting. Just wanted to make sure it's all good." The 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "All good, Tyler. Ray is a worrier. Y'all enjoy. There's lemonade in the fridge in the pitcher. Please be careful with the shed. Wasps this time of year." "See," I said, but my voice came out thin again. The 3 dots stayed, blinking. Then Hal added, "If you can leave a review before you drive off, that helps me a lot. 5 stars keeps the lights on. God bless." Kayla opened the fridge. There was a glass pitcher on the top, shelf with condensation on the sides. It tasted like real lemonade, not the mix, tart with pulp that had settled to the bottom. Someone had stirred that today. Jess brought me the guest book from the coffee table, a spiral notebook with a boot on the cover. "Look, the last 10 entries were all in different inks, but the same hand." It took me a minute to notice because the names changed. The curves and the way the T's crossed were the same. All of them had the same energy. "Hal is the best. We'll be back." 5 stars for the sweetest host. Cookies were the best surprise. One had a little drawing of a stick figure under a sun. The handwriting had gotten shakier toward the bottom of the page, as if whoever was doing it had gotten tired or the pen was dying. "Maybe people share a pen and copy each other to be cute," Kayla said, and I loved her for trying to stick with a version that didn't rattle her. "Who leaves a guest book anymore?" Miguel said. "This is like bed and breakfast grandma behavior." We grilled. We played cards. The porch light played its on-off game with nothing. A wind pushed the trees all at once, even though the weather app said it was calm. At 9, the landline rang. I didn't know what to do with that sound at first because it belongs to a different decade. It rang with that metallic bell sound, and we all froze and looked at it like it was a snake. "Don't answer it," Jess whispered, which made me laugh even as adrenaline shot up the back of my neck. I picked it up. "Hello?" Static hummed for 2 seconds. Then a voice like a recording of a voice. "Hey there," it said. "Y'all get in okay?" The way it said y'all was right but wrong, like an actor. The tone was cheerful and a little loud, and underneath there was another sound like wind in a microphone. Kayla's eyes were wide. I put it on speaker. "Yeah," I said. "We're all set." "Good deal," the voice said. "Don't forget, 5 stars keeps the lights on." Then it clicked dead. I held the receiver for a second because my hand didn't believe it was allowed to put it down yet. Miguel said what we were all thinking. What if that's a recording? Of what? Jess said. "Of him," Miguel said, like one of those systems that piece together messages. We tried to shrug it off with jokes about AI Hal. Kayla said she'd shower first. I sat on the porch and texted my dad a picture of the yard with the pickup length shadow of the porch post across the pale dirt. My dad texted back a thumbs up and a deer emoji. While I sat there, the screen door creaked and shut behind me with no footsteps. I turned. Nobody. The kitchen window was a black mirror with my face in it. The ceiling fan spun lazily. Jess came out and sat next to me. "We can go stay in town if you want," she said. "I think there was a Best Western." "We already paid," I said, "and breakfast is stocked, and it's probably nothing." Even saying it made the dark deepen like a stagehand had turned. A dimmer. I watched the shed. I kept thinking I saw a shape move at the edge of its roofline and then not. There was a padlock on the doors, old and silver. One hinge sagged. A moth tapped the porch light's glass. I said out loud, "We're not going in the shed," because saying it made me feel like I had control over a thing. Around 11, the house settled like they do. Kayla fell asleep on the couch with a blanket. Jess and Miguel played another hand and started yawning between turns. I put the dishes in the washer and set it to run. The house had that late-night echo where small sounds feel like they come from the next room even when it's you. I checked the doors. The front deadbolt slid into place. The back door had a small chain that looked cosmetic more than useful. I latched it anyway. At 1:12 a.m., according to the green numbers on the microwave, I woke to the sound of the dryer tumbling, the whirl and thump of something like sneakers. For a second I thought Kayla had decided to do a load, but the timing was too clean, like the house had waited for us all to be fully asleep. The laundry closet was off the hall. The dryer hum was a heavy presence in the air. I got up and opened the door. The drum spun empty. Heat rolled out. The knob was set to off. I turned it to a cycle and back to off to prove a point to myself. Like an idiot. Something tapped the kitchen window from outside. A patient. Knuckle tap like a polite person who doesn't want to wake you but will. Tap. A pause as if listening. Tap. I went to the window with a courage I would like to say came from being brave but was probably just momentum. I pressed 2 fingers to the curtain and moved it an inch. The yard was a softer dark than before. The porch light wasn't on. The shed's padlock glinted faintly. On the other side of the glass, 2 inches from my face, there were 4 fingerprints as if someone had pressed their hand there earlier, and the oils had decided to show themselves now. I stepped back. I had not touched that window. I had not touched any window. My joints felt hollow. Every instinct I own pulled the fire alarm inside me and told me to wake everyone and leave and never look back. Before I could speak, the landline rang. The sound landed like a hammer. Kayla sat up on the couch with a small sound, hand to her chest. Jess and Miguel were in the hallway already, faces pale in the kitchen light. I picked it up because I had to, because that's somehow the life we live now. "Hey there," the voice said, cheerfully wrong. "You're up late." I didn't put it on speaker. I held it to my ear and stared at the fingerprints. "Who is this?" I said. "Who am I speaking to?" "You're speaking to your host," the voice said. "Leave the keys on the hook when you go. If you can leave a review before you drive off, that helps me a lot. 5 stars keeps the lights on." It clicked. In the silence that rose after, we heard footsteps cross the porch. Slow, like someone who doesn't want the boards to squeak. The motion light did not come on. We stared at the door. The door stared back. "Ray," Jess whispered. "Call Ray." I scrolled to the local friends page and jabbed at his number with my thumb. It went straight to voicemail. It was late. It was Saturday. I sent a text anyway. "This is Tyler next door. Someone is on our porch. Please call me." Kayla had the app open. She typed, "Hal, someone is outside." The reply came in a speed that felt rehearsed. "I'm right outside. It's safe." Kayla made a noise like she'd been touched. She turned the phone to show me. The text bubble pulsed like it might say more. Then it added, "Check the shed. Extra blankets." Miguel shook his head. No way." The door handle turned slowly and stopped against the deadbolt with a friendly, useless clink. Then it tried again, gentle, like someone who doesn't want to scratch the paint. We stood there, 4 adults, watching a door handle, while the dryer began to spin even though I had turned it off. The ceiling fan clicked. The porch steps creaked, as if the weight had moved. "Get your shoes," I said. "We're leaving." We grabbed keys, wallets, 2 bags. The rest could burn for all I cared. When I opened the back door, hot air rushed in like an animal. The chain swung uselessly against the wood. The yard looked smaller from out there. We half-jogged to the car. The chirp of the unlock felt obscene. I hit the start button. The dash lit up. The engine turned once and died. The second time it turned and coughed. The third time it didn't do anything. "Battery," Miguel said, twisting in his seat to look behind us. The porch looked back blankly, the lights still off. "Lights weren't on," I said. "We didn't drain it." There was a tap on the back glass. We all jumped hard enough to make the suspension rock. I spun in the seat. The tap had left a small smudge like the back of a finger. Kayla dug her nails into my arm and didn't notice. Jess said, very carefully, "Tyler, please." I took a breath that felt like a wrong size and held the start button again. The engine caught. The sound of it was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. I floated us backward and down the drive, dust breathing up around us. In the rear view, the porch light finally came on after we'd already turned. For a second it lit a shape that might have been a person, but could have been a trick of the wood posts lining up. Then the trees took it away. At the gate I leaned out and punched 1977. The keypad blinked red. I tried again. Red. Kayla rolled down her window and said, "Please," like the gate spoke English. I tried 1977 slower. Green. The gate clicked, and I shoved us through like a berth. We didn't talk until the cattle guard rattled under us. Then we talked a lot all at once. Everyone had seen something slightly different. Kayla swore she saw a shadow on the other side of the kitchen window with shoulders too broad. Jess saw a figure on the porch steps whose head didn't turn right when it moved. Miguel said when he went to grab his bag from the couch, he found the house manual open to the page where Hal's note was, and underlined in a different pen were the words, "5 stars keeps the lights on." We drove to a hotel off I-35 that smelled like bleach and old carpet and security. I booked it standing in the parking lot with my phone. The clerk didn't glance up when 4 people with winded eyes walked in, paid cash for bottled water, and carried their shoes. In the room, we put the chain on and pushed a chair against the door like a movie. We didn't sleep. We lay there and watched the AC cycle and the red numbers move. At 6:04 a.m., my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "This is Ray. Come by when it's daylight. Don't go back inside." We drove back around 8 when the sun made everything look forgivable. Ray was in his yard waiting at the fence with 2 coffee mugs. He handed one to me like we were men discussing irrigation. "You all right?" he said. "We left," I said. "We're fine." He looked relieved in the way of people who have seen too many things not end that way. "Good, Ray," I said. "What is this?" He didn't say anything for a second. He watched the house like it might flicker and show a different version of itself if he stared. "Hal was a good man," he said finally. "He liked people. He liked having company. He used to sit on that porch and talk to folks. When the chemo got bad, his daughter came to stay. After he died, she set up that rental from Houston. It was a way to keep the place. She passed the next spring. Car wreck. That app kept taking bookings. The grandkids tried to shut it down. They said customer service told them someone had to log in from the original email. Nobody had it. They sent death certificates. Nothing happened. You tried to tell people," Jess said. "The note on the doormat. I put that there," Ray said. "Some folks listen, some don't. Some leave reviews like everything is normal. That's what spooks me." Kayla swallowed. "The reviews look like they're written by the same person." Ray nodded. "I know his hand," he said. "He wrote a lot of lists. He left notes in the feed shed to himself so he wouldn't forget things. That's his hand." "Are you saying—" Miguel started, then stopped because he didn't know how to finish a sentence like that without sounding sick. "I'm saying some things want to stay the way they were," Ray said. "And some systems make that easier." We stood there in the yard with the dew burning off, listening to the grief in the cicadas. I thought about the house, the tidy kitchen, the cookies, the fingerprints, the way the voice said, "Y'all like a mask?" I thought about how many people had stayed there, how many had laughed it off and typed 5 stars because they didn't want to think about it. I opened the app. The reservation was still active. It offered me a button. Leave a review. I clicked. It took me to a blank field. Then, before I could type, words began to appear one letter at a time as if someone else was typing on my phone, and the letters arrived perfectly steady like a heartbeat. Hal was the best host. The house was spotless and cozy. We felt safe and cared for. 5 stars. We will be back. I didn't touch the screen. I let it type until the period. Then I hit back as if the app were alive and I could spook it. The screen resisted for a second, like the phone had grown a second set of hands. Then it gave up and blinked back to the listing page. I shook my hand, because that's the thing you do when something electric runs through you. We drove to the house together with Ray. He wouldn't let us go in. He stepped onto the porch while we stood in the yard. He bent and picked up the doormat. Under it lay a key on a twine loop. The loop had an old brass tag on it that said 1 in someone's neat hand. He held it up so we could see, then looked at the sky like he was appealing to something above human bureaucracy. "No more," he said to the door. "Enough." The porch light clicked on in the bright morning and then off as if rolling its shoulders. Ray put the key in his pocket. He walked to the shed with that old man's stubbornness that is mostly love. He didn't touch the lock. He just stood there and looked at it. On the door, scratched into the wood, there were tally marks. 5 in a group, then 5, then 5. 30 or so. The scratch was fresh on the last one. He touched it with a finger, and then wiped his hand on his jeans like it had left something on him you couldn't see. "Come on," he said to us. "Softer now. Go on back to town. Don't leave no review. And don't answer no calls from numbers you don't recognize." We left. On the highway, the world snapped back into the space where you can pretend things make sense. We ate kolaches at a place with a neon sign and watched kids in baseball uniforms climb into trucks. The sun warmed the hood of the car. A man wiped a windshield 2 pumps over. Everything was the way it had been the day before. At home that night, I got one more message through the app. It came at 9:17 p.m. "Y'all left early. I understand. If you can leave a review before you drive off, that helps me a lot. 5 stars keeps the lights on. God bless." Under it, a photo of the guest book open to a clean page, as if waiting. At the top, in that same steady hand, a title had been written. 5-star host. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even unkind. It was a request so normal you wouldn't notice what it costs to say no. I didn't reply. I closed the app and set my phone face down and sat in the dark, listening to the refrigerator cycle on and off, and the building. Inhale. A week later, the listing was still up. The newest review said, "Hal is a legend. Lemonade was perfect." The profile picture was still the man in the straw hat with the gentle eyes. I clicked on the name of the person who left that review. No other reviews. No profile photo. Join this month. I know the right move is to report it and call and stay on hold and send emails with the words estate and fraud and please. I know the right move is to fight the system with the system until it admits a person can die and a booking can end. I have started doing that. I promise. But here's the thing. I can't shake. If kindness is a kind of force when it's alive, what does it turn into when it won't let go? What happens when a house remembers your footsteps and your hands on the glass and your voice in the phone, and all it wants is to keep playing the part you gave it? If you stay there, you might have a nice weekend. You might drink lemonade and see deer and sleep under a fan that ticks. And you might leave a 5-star review because it is easier than saying what you felt when you woke at 1:12 and knew someone was on the porch who didn't want to be alone. If you see a listing with a host who replies in under a minute every time, ask yourself who is answering. If the porch light comes on late, don't wait to see who's on the other side of the door. If you find a bowl of pecans and a note in a careful hand asking for 5 stars, take a picture, then leave. And if you ever get a call on a landline in a quiet kitchen in the hill country, and a cheerful voice says, "Hey there, y'all get in." Okay, hang up before it asks you for anything. The house is listening. The lights are already on. We rented the apartment because it was cheap, not because we liked it. It was the top floor of a narrow old house carved into 3 units, the kind of place that still had a mail slot and a cast iron radiator that clanked twice before any heat came through. September, end of the month, already cooler at night. I told my girlfriend, Mina, that we could make it feel like ours if we just got through those first 2 weeks of boxes and cleaning. She squinted at the bedroom and said, "Are we keeping that?" She meant the mirror. It was bolted to the wall opposite the bed, a heavy antique with a thick beveled edge and little black freckles in the silvering. The frame had carved vines and a thin crack running along the bottom right corner. It looked like something that belonged in a bed and breakfast, not a starter apartment with peeling paint around the outlets. We tried to take it down on day one. I put my fingers under the frame and realized immediately it wasn't going anywhere. 6 screws, no, bolts, through the frame into the studs, heads stripped like someone had tried to turn them 100 times with the wrong size. The landlord, a middle-aged guy named Aaron, shrugged when I called. "Came with the building, safer to leave it. We had a patch fall once when someone took a mirror off. Plaster's funny. Mina didn't like sleeping with it opposite the bed. She said there are superstitions about mirrors catching things at night. I told her I wasn't superstitious and I meant it, but even I didn't like catching my reflection right before I fell asleep. It's like having a quiet version of yourself, sitting up watching you all night. The first few nights were heavy, like jet lag. We'd moved across town, but my head felt a second behind everything. The radiator's clank sounded like someone testing a spoon against a jar. Pipes hummed faintly. We'd gotten a second-hand bed frame that creaked a little when either of us rolled over. And the mirror, always there when you looked up. If you've never slept directly across from a mirror, it's worse than you think. Your brain keeps catching motion. It's always you. But your lizard brain goes quick alarm, then catches up. The first time something was off, it was small. I was brushing my teeth with the bathroom door open so I could talk to Mina, who was unpacking books in the bedroom. The mirror was in my line of sight, past the hall. Our bed sat low in the frame you're picturing, and the mirror occupied most of the wall opposite, directly catching the doorway. In the reflection, the air behind Mina looked darker, as if that corner of the bedroom was a shade or two dimmer. We didn't have a bulb out. It looked like a shadow where a person would stand. I told myself the glass was old and uneven, so it deepened the corners. I finished brushing my teeth and didn't mention it. On Saturday, my friend Gabe came by to help mount a TV and drink my beer. He's a big energy guy, always talking. In the afternoon light, the mirror looked warm. Old glass makes everything look like a memory. Mina laughed and told him it made her feel like she was going to wake up in an old photograph. Gabe grinned. "Better than a TikTok video where the filter doesn't catch your eyebrows," he said, and he stepped in front of the mirror and flexed like an idiot. I threw a coaster at him. It hit his shoulder. He laughed and then squinted at the glass. "Who's that?" he said. Mina looked up from a box. "Who's who?" "In the back," he said, pointing at a spot behind his reflected shoulder. "Looks like..." He moved his head side to side. "Never mind. Weird smudge." He wiped the mirror with the sleeve of his hoodie, rubbing a circle into the glass. His reflection smeared under his hand. The spot didn't change. I tried to see whatever he saw. The bright daylight meant the mirror showed everything. The vague outline of the bed, our pile of blankets, the doorway behind me. Behind Gabe's reflection, slightly off-center, was a shape darker than the rest. It wasn't crisp like a person, more like a place your eye refuses to focus on. A trick of the aging silver, I thought. Those black specks pitted the surface. Gabe shrugged and picked up the drill. That night, we brought a blanket to cover it. We draped it over the top and tucked it behind the frame. It didn't cover completely, but it was enough to stop that sense of being watched. We slept better. 3 nights later, we came home from a late grocery run and found the blanket on the floor. I blamed the radiator below the window, said it must have gusted when the heat kicked. Mina said the radiator was off. We put the blanket back up. The next morning when I rolled over, I caught the mirror in my half-sleep and saw myself lying there, but with the blanket still on. I blinked and the blanket was actually on. It was my brain mixing. You know that moment when you wake and your brain chooses what's real? I told myself it was that. Over the next week, 3 different people commented on the mirror without prompting. The first was our upstairs neighbor, Ms. Dawson, who stopped by to welcome us with cookies that tasted like the end of church coffee. She used to be a nurse, retired. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom and said, "Don't you hate it when they put mirrors right where you sleep?" I said, laughing, "I guess it's an old design choice." She put the plate down and cocked her head. I could swear, "Sorry, my eyes. No, it's nothing." She touched my arm lightly. "If you ever feel dizzy in this room, drink water. Old houses get stuffy." The second was my sister, Sam. She brought her 5-year-old Ava on a Sunday afternoon. 2 minutes in, Ava stood in front of the mirror and waved at herself because that's what kids do. Then she stopped and frowned. "Who's that behind us?" she asked. Sam, tired and juggling snacks, didn't even look up. "No one." Ava pulled at Sam's sleeve. "No, Mommy, look. The man." "Hey," I said, quickly joking. "No men allowed except me." Ava stared at the mirror a long time with that serious little kid face, then turned her head. "He doesn't move," she said, small, like she was thinking out loud. Now I mentioned it to Mina that night. I told her about the vaguely darker patch. She admitted that she'd noticed too, but hadn't wanted to say anything. "Every time I brush my hair," she said, "I see something that looks like someone standing where the hamper is. It doesn't look like a person exactly. It looks like where a person would be." We put the blanket back up and taped it down this time. The tape pulled paint when we pressed it behind the frame. Another little thing. When you turned the bedroom lamp on and off, the mirror flashed a fraction out of sync, like the light changed in the glass half a beat later. You wouldn't notice? Unless you were watching for it. I started watching for it. I also started waking at 3:17 a.m. I know because the digital clock glowed red. 3:17 was when the radiator hissed. Maybe. It's probably when the building's hot water system cycles. But I started associating that time with the room and with the sound of Mina's breathing next to me and the shiny rectangle dark with our covered mirror. We tried leaving the door closed at night so the mirror would reflect only the dark room, no hall light to catch and flicker. The door didn't latch all the way. It would drift and then click. One night I woke to the sound of that click and opened my eyes to see the mirror uncovered. The blanket pooled at the base like a shed skin. I said Mina's name out loud and she startled awake, sitting up in one motion. We both looked at the mirror like we expected to see someone obvious, like an intruder. There was no one but us, doubled, except it wasn't quite doubled. Behind our reflection, in the place where the closet should align, the mirror showed what looked like a dark coat rack, tall and thin, that we didn't own. Our actual closet door was closed, blank and white. In the mirror, a slender vertical shape stood in front of where the door would be. It wasn't a piece of furniture we had in the room. It wasn't even furniture. It looked like a tall, narrow shadow, as if someone had backed up against the wall and then their outline refused to leave. I got out of bed, walked to the mirror, and tried to line up my reflection with the shadow to see if it was my own shape from a different angle. The shadow did not move when I moved. That's the best way I can say it. It didn't slide in response like a reflection should. It was fixed. When I stepped left, my reflected self stepped left, but the shadow stayed exactly where it was, behind, where I had been. We kept telling ourselves we could explain it. Old glass, stains, the cracked corner catching light different. We bought a different blanket, thicker, and secured it with duct tape this time. I took a picture for fun, just to show the little hack job cover-up as a joke to text Gabe. When I looked at the photo, it showed the blanket slipping down the mirror in a way that hadn't happened yet. The still image looked like a second later than the moment I took it. Maybe I caught the blanket mid-sag, but when I looked up, the blanket wasn't sagging. I snapped another picture. In that one, the blanket was fine. I deleted the weird one and told myself it was live photo weirdness and I had just caught the wrong frame. Mina's friend Jess visited mid-October and slept on our couch. She's blunt in a way that's refreshing until it isn't. The next morning, she blew on her coffee and said, "I know you don't want to hear this, but mirrors opposite beds creep me out. I swore I saw someone stand behind me when I checked last night, like a woman with her head tilted. You guys haven't had any weird dreams, right? She grinned like she was fishing. We didn't grin back. That was the day I called Aaron again and asked if we could hire someone to take it down and patch whatever was behind it at our own expense. He sighed and said someone had already tried once. It's not just the bolts. There's weird glue. I don't want you ripping the plaster. Tell you what, I'll send my handyman next week to look. The handyman never showed. A note slid under our door the next day, said he'd come by and knocked, and no one answered. We were home all day. Mina held the note and said, "Do you smell that?" It smelled like old pennies. Not strong, but there. Metal and dust. The next escalation, if that's what it was, came in a way even someone as stubborn as me had to admit felt off. I was changing for work, standing in front of the mirror with my shirt unbuttoned. The blanket was off because we had to wash it. We'd spilled coffee, another thing that made the room smell old and sweet. The early light came in low. I looked at myself and then past myself, the way you do when you're checking your hair or if your shirt hangs right. Behind my reflection, near the foot of the bed, was a shape darker than the surrounding air. It looked shoulder high. It was as if the mirror had a bruise. I stepped backward to compare the real room to the mirrored room. In real space, nothing stood there. In the mirror, the shape remained. I raised my hand. My reflected hand raised at the same time. The shape did not. But then my reflection seemed to hesitate, half a beat late, like we'd lost sync for a blink. My chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with running up the stairs. I stood perfectly still and waited to see if it would happen again. It didn't, but I'd already lost the sense that what I saw was entirely tied to me. That evening we did a dumb experiment. We stuck sticky notes on the wall around the mirror frame, a little grid. We wrote numbers on them. We figured if something in the glass warped space, we'd at least see if it stayed tied to certain spots. We took a video panning across the mirror. When we watched it back, you could see the distortion taper off near the far right, then thicken near note 7, as if the glass had a gravity. This is ridiculous, I know, and probably not a real way to measure anything. But we'd crossed the line into trying to understand. The following weekend, there was a storm. The power went out around midnight in our block. The sound of the city went heavier and softer, if that makes sense, like everything had a blanket thrown over it. The bedroom was a rectangle of darker dark, except for my phone lying face up on the bedside table, lighting the ceiling from a notification. The mirror, uncovered because we'd washed the second blanket and then procrastinated retaping it, was a duller patch on the wall, catching nothing. I woke at 3:17 again, this time cold. The kind of cold that feels like someone opened a refrigerator. Reached for Mina's back and touched skin chilled like she'd been standing by a window. I thought about the window being cracked, but it was closed. We tape sealed it our first week to keep the draft out. Then I noticed the faint sound the mirror was making. That seems impossible. Mirrors don't make sounds. But there it was. Brittle little tap, not in rhythm that you'd swear was the sound of a fingernail touching glass. My mouth felt dry. I sat up and the bed springs squealed. "Hey," I said to Mina. "Hey, wake up." She inhaled and made that little confused noise she makes when you pull her out of sleep. "Do you hear that?" I asked, which is the last question you should ask in a situation like that, because now she hears everything and none of it is specific. The tap came again, 3 times, and then a muffled scrape lower, like something slid. I reached for my phone. The power was out, but my phone had 13% battery. I turned the camera on and pointed it at the mirror because my brain wanted proof of something it also didn't want proof of. When the screen came up, it showed the bedroom in grainy low light. We saw ourselves, blue pale. Behind us, in the mirror on the screen, not in real life, not in the actual room, there were shapes. I don't know another word. They weren't silhouettes exactly. They were thicker places in the reflected air, human-sized. I counted 4. They were arranged in a loose half circle a few feet back from where our reflected bed sat. None of them moved. None of them had faces for my brain to lock onto. It was like someone had cut people out of a black fabric and pinned them up. They were not in our room. We could not see them when we looked away from the phone. But they were in the phone's view of the mirror. Mina made a small sound. Not a scream. A tight inhale that got stuck. She reached for my arm and squeezed hard enough to leave half-moons later. I slid off the bed but kept my eyes on the phone screen. The shapes did not move with me. My reflection moved. The shapes stayed. I walked toward the mirror. The phone's screen showed the shapes taking up more of the frame, but they did not step forward or back. The closest one was lined up with note 7, where the distortion had been worse. I reached out for the frame, intending to finally ignore the landlord and rip the damn thing off. My fingers touched wood, smooth with age. In the phone screen, my hand hovered inches from the glass, but it didn't look like my hand. It looked thinner and pale in a way that I'm not. My nails looked unfamiliar. For a second, I thought the delay had gotten worse. Then my reflection's hand pressed flat to the glass in the image before I had actually moved to touch it. When my real skin made contact a moment later, the glass was shockingly cold. A pulse of cold traveled up my wrist, not in my arm, but under my skin like something spilled. Mina said, "Don't," and I yanked my hand back. A mark bloomed on the inside of the glass where my reflection's palm had been. You know how breath fogs a window in winter? It looked like that. A smear in exactly a palm shape, 5 oval smudges where the fingertips would be. Except we weren't breathing on the glass. It was behind the glass, like moisture trapped inside. We stood there in the dead power night and watched the handprint fade, not fast, like a breath, but slowly, the edges drawing in as if it were being absorbed. The shapes didn't turn. They didn't need to. The one nearest the handprint seemed denser in that moment. Through the phone, like black water stirred once. The radiator clicked even though the power was off. I dropped my phone in a stupid reaction to the noise. It landed face up, skidding, on the wood floor. The camera pointed at the ceiling for a second, then rolled and landed aimed toward the bed. In that slanted angle, it caught Mina's reflection in the mirror. She'd stood, reflexively, and took a step. In the phone, in the mirror, another version of her did not move. It stood beside the bed, with its head tilted enough to make my stomach flip, like Jess had described, like something that didn't understand how a head attaches to a body. I grabbed my phone. The screen flashed a low battery warning. I killed the camera and turned the phone face down. We backed out of the room. We left the bedroom door open so the streetlight black could paint a stripe on the floor. We sat in the hall on the runner rug that came with the unit and listened like kids listening for parents. There were 2 more taps after that, and polite. Little clusters of 3, and then nothing except our breath. We slept on the couch with the TV unplugged so it wouldn't startle us if the power came back on. When it did, around 6 a.m., I woke to light and a faint warmth returning to the air. We both pretended we'd simply fallen asleep out there because the couch was comfortable in a new home novelty way. I asked Mina if we should move. She shook her head. "We can't afford to," she said, practical and flat. "We'll cover it. We'll keep it covered." We covered it. We retaped the edges. I pulled a dresser against the wall to pin the blanket in place. Even with the cover, I stopped meeting my own eyes in the bathroom mirror. I started shaving without looking, directly at myself. I framed texts to Aaron in my head but never sent them because what do you write? Your mirror has people in it, and they don't move when we do. You might think I'm the one who saw things because I'm the one telling you the story. It wasn't just me. 2 days later, Ms. Dawson knocked at 8 in the evening with a package that had been misdelivered to her. She glanced past me into the bedroom and went still in a way that read as medical to me, like she was listening to something inside her. Her loose cardigan sleeve slipped down, exposing a thin wrist. "You covered the mirror," she said. "Yeah," I said. She nodded slowly. "It's better that way." Then, like she hadn't meant to say it aloud, "The night Mr. Albee died, he fell in there." She pointed not at the bed, but at the mirror. "Not literally. Don't look at me like that," she said, smiling a little. "He fell on the floor at the foot of the bed, and when I went in with the key, I looked up and I swear I saw him already on the other side, like he'd gotten there first. He was 61 and stubborn and had the expression of someone who was ready to argue. But in the glass, he looked like he'd finally decided to go quiet." She lifted the package. "This was at my door," she said, and then caught herself. "I shouldn't have told you that." "Who was Mr. Albee?" Mina asked, appearing beside me. "Old tenant," Ms. Dawson said. "Years ago. I did nights then, but I remembered his calendar stuck up by the phone. He had a dentist appointment he didn't make." After she left, we Googled his name with our address and found an obituary for a man with that surname and the right age. No cause of death listed, nothing we could use. I closed the tab and felt stupid for both looking and feeling a hot prickling of fear that the mirror would somehow know we'd checked. The handprint came back. Not visibly, not like a ghost movie. I mean that 2 weeks later, when I finally worked up the nerve to pull the blanket off in daylight to see if the tape had damaged the frame, I saw, from the side at an angle, smears inside the glass. There were streaks like watermarks, and quick, as a flash of fish in a pond, the curved ghost of 5 print ovals. They were under the surface. I ran a cloth over the outside and it didn't change them at all. The last thing that happened in that apartment was small compared to a handprint. It was so small that if I told it to a friend over a beer, I would expect them to say, "That's all." But it's the one that made me decide to go. It was the one that blew past my rationalizing, and now when I brush my teeth anywhere else, there's a corner of my eye that aches with remembering it. I left the room and returned a half-minute later to grab my wallet, leaving the door open. Mina was in the kitchen humming. The blanket was still up, edges taped. The room looked normal, messy, bed unmade, clothes slung over the back of a chair. The mirror reflected it all darkly. As I stepped into the doorway, my reflection stepped into the doorway in perfect sync. And in the mirror, in the small space between my reflected shoulder and the door jamb, there was a figure up close. So close the glass should have caught a forehead bump. It was an absence shaped exactly like Sam at the height she is, and with her hair tucked behind one ear the way she does when she's thinking. The hair wasn't visible. That sounds wrong because it was shaped like her, but I knew her shape. I knew the way she'd stand when she came by and looked at our dumb moving-in chaos. The shape didn't move when I froze. The shape didn't look at me. It was as if the mirror had stored the outline of my sister from the day she visited and was showing it again like a replay you didn't ask for. And then, as I stepped into the bedroom and out of the doorway, my reflection moved. The window light shifted, and the shape didn't slide off to keep standing behind me. It stayed in the exact coordinates it had been in, a fraction of a second, longer than it should have, and then it was just an oddly dark patch near note 7. Maybe our eyes project familiar patterns onto noise. Maybe the silver backing of old mirrors stains in roughly human shapes because that's what our brains snap to. Maybe humidity plus temperature makes reactive spots grow like freckles in the same places most people stand. All that might be true. I might have moved out because of coincidence layered on a building's particular old bones creaks. We left in late November. We broke the lease and lost our deposit. Aaron didn't argue. He seemed almost relieved to have one less conversation. We told ourselves we were chasing cheaper rent in a place with more light. Before we left, we took one last photo of the bedroom for our own records, in case the landlord tried to claim damages. I took it with my phone from the hall to capture everything in one frame. It wasn't a live photo because I'd turned those off to save space. It was a still. When I checked the photo later, that night in the new place, surrounded by boxes and the safe, boring reflection of my face in a small bathroom mirror, I noticed a detail I can't explain away with old glass or stain patterns. In the photo, the bedroom door is open. The mirror is covered. That coarse blanket is taped up, wrinkled. And in the shadow on the floor in front of the bed, in the strip of light the hall throws, there is a darker line that curves like the side of a footstep, and then another beside it. They're not shoe prints, they're not smudges, they are a way the light refuses to lay down flat. If I zoom in, I can see the faint suggestion of toes. The shape is not crisp. It's the opposite of crisp. It's the idea of someone's foot, being there when the picture made itself. We've lived in the new place for months. The new place has no big mirrors. There's a thrifted one over the dresser, but we hung it at an angle, and it's small enough that if something wanted to stand behind us in it, It would look like a little smudge and we could laugh and say, that's just how the light falls. At night, we sleep with the closet doors closed and the bathroom door closed, and I don't wake at 3:17 anymore. But I catch myself doing something I never did before. When I walk toward any mirror in a public place, a restroom at a restaurant, a shop window, the black blank TV screen before it wakes, I glance over my shoulder in the reflection, not to see people in the room behind me, but to check if the version of me in the glass is alone. I look past my own shoulder to check that the space has nothing stored in it. I wait a heartbeat to see if the reflected room changes half a beat late. Twice now, in 2 different places, I've been brushing my teeth or lifting a cup and felt breath on the side of my neck when there was no draft. Not cold, just enough to raise the hair along my skin. Both times I stared at myself and didn't look away. Both times I could swear there was an extra contour in the background lines waiting for me to blink so it could settle into its spot. Both times, the glass behaved like glass is supposed to. I'm telling you this because when we were packing up and I unscrewed a strip of painter's tape that had come loose along the top of the blanket, a small brittle thing flaked out from between the mirror and the wall and landed on the baseboard. It was a clipping. Someone long ago had slid it there like a bookmark. A corner of newsprint, yellowed and light as ash. It said, "Viewing will be held at," and then the cut ended. Underneath, in a different font, a line about a sale on bedroom furniture. The address was a store I used to walk past as a kid before it closed. I put the clipping back where I found it because it felt rude to pocket something that had been sitting hidden for years in someone else's house. I pressed it again between the mirror and the wall like tucking a note into a book. When I pushed, the glass gave a fraction, like a held breath. The edges of the frame creaked in a small voice. If you ever rent that apartment, if you ever lie in that bedroom at 3 in the morning and feel a cold touch of attention, you'll find the mirror covered. Maybe someone new since us will have peeled it off, curious. Maybe the tape will have taken more paint off and left a ragged shape on the wall, and the landlord will have to repaint. Maybe the new paint will change the smell of the room for a while and make the air feel innocent again. But the mirror will be there, because buildings keep their oldest bones. I don't think the shapes mean harm. I think they are a mistake of time, a layering. I think the mirror does what a mirror does, only more so. It keeps what belongs to it, light and backward rooms and whatever outlines we've put into it by standing and living our tired days. When people visit, the mirror learns where they go. It remembers. It doesn't move when you move because it never promised to follow you. It's not a window, it's a place. If you see them, don't wave. If you take a picture, turn the phone off after and let the glass darken. If you hear tapping, don't lean forward to match it. I'm not superstitious, but I'm also not going to give anything my name that I don't want calling me back later. This is the last thing, last week. In the brightness of a harmless afternoon, I walked past a barbershop and checked the long mirror inside out of habit. My reflection passed, and there behind him was a held dark place at shoulder height. It stayed where the mirror wanted it, not where I wanted it. It stayed like it was patient. I kept walking and didn't look back. I didn't need to. It isn't the looking that keeps it. It's the facing. That's what the old mirror taught me, night after night. What faces you isn't always trying to get out. Sometimes it's just waiting for you to stand still long enough to see that it was never moving in the first place. I took the night shift at a roadside rental off exit 41 because it was easy money, and I figured nothing really happens between midnight and dawn. It wasn't quite a motel, not quite an Airbnb. The owner had bought a run of old motor court rooms and tied them together under one lobby, with a counter like a diner and a brass key rack that looked like it belonged in a museum. Locals called it the Pines, even though the only trees are scrubby, and the sign out front has a cartoon pine cracked down the middle. We charged $97 a night, and people paid it because the highway gets long and the next real town is 40 miles. My second night there, Lena told me about the 3 o'clock thing. She worked evenings before me and liked to linger when I came in. She said it like you tell somebody a rule about the coffee machine. At 3, she said, 1 or more doors will unlatch. Keys will slide across the counter like a kid is pushing them, and you'll hear a voice telling whoever it is that it's time to leave. I laughed because it sounded like a prank she was trying to set up. She didn't laugh back. "It doesn't care if you laugh," she said, tying her hair up and handing me the cord to the little silver bell. "You'll see." The building is a low rectangle with a shallow lobby in the middle and rooms branching off to both sides. A porch that runs the length with plastic chairs, the ice machine humming like a tired refrigerator. The highway is close enough that you hear gear changes and engine brakes as punctuation every few minutes. There's a convenience store on the other side of the parking lot with the kind of old neon that fights to stay lit. The air smells like hot rubber during the day and whatever the cleaning staff uses to mop the tile at night. A lemon that isn't. Lemon Raj, the manager, is one of those calm people who can look at a computer screen and make problems stop existing. He was always half cheerful, half resigned, like someone who has given up arguing with weather. "You'll get used to the alarms, the people locking themselves out, the ice running out," he said, handing me a ring with the master keys attached. The brass fobs are heavy and have stamped numbers. The 3 a.m. thing is annoying, not dangerous. If anyone asks, it's the HVAC or the building settling, all that. "Why does it always happen at 3? I asked. He said, "Because 3 is when we notice," and smiled like that was supposed to help. The first week was boring in the best way. A mother with 2 kids in pajamas wandered in at 1 after some argument with her husband. You could tell by the silences. 2 construction guys with mud on their boots took rooms next door to each other and talked loudly through the wall while they brushed their teeth. A nervous salesman in a tie too tight asked 3 times whether the deadbolt worked and then shoved a chair under the handle anyway. I offered coffee and microwaved cinnamon rolls. I refilled the ice. I watched the security cameras on mute and learned the rhythm of the place. The store lights blink once at 2, like someone behind the counter is stretching. A train far off goes through at 2:18 and again at 4:06. Coyotes sometimes cut across the edge of the parking lot like shadows with feet. The first time it happened, I was halfway through a dumb movie with the volume low and the closed captions on. It was exactly 3, not 2:59 and change, not 3 and a minute. My phone clicked from 2:59 to 3 and the little silver bell on the counter shook against its string. It didn't ring. It trembled. The lobby door unlatched and opened 4 inches as if the air had tilted. I waited for someone to come in. No one did. The brass key for room 12 slid across the counter and tapped the edge, then pivoted, then slid again until it fell into the drawer under the counter with a soft clink. I could hear the outside corridor camera feed, the soft hiss of the mic picking up nothing, and over it I heard a voice. It didn't come from a specific place. It didn't come through the speaker. It didn't come from the air vent. It sounded the way your name sounds when you think someone is calling you in a crowd. It said, "It's time to leave." I couldn't tell whether it was talking to me or to someone else. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't warm either. The words were just flat and certain, like a reminder. I stood up so fast the stool tipped and clattered against the tiles. In the room 12 camera, there was the bed and the microwave and the TV reflection and a person-sized absence where the darkness looked thicker. No one was there. The lock view showed the handle turn and the bolt retract like an invisible hand had done it. The door cracked open, stopped against the latch, then swung wider all on its own, the chain sliding as if someone was careful not to wake a child. I went to the porch. Room 12's door was open. I called, and the empty room called back in a softer version of my voice. I stepped inside and got that feeling you get in a church when no one else is there, the sense that the room is listening. There was a suitcase on the luggage stand, cheap black fabric with a loose thread by the handle. In the bathroom, the light was on and a towel was damp. Steam fogged the mirror so I could see where a hand had wiped a circle, the way kids draw. A smiley face to make a parent laugh. Whoever was staying there was gone. The bed was made like no one had touched it. When I backed out, the door put itself gently to and latched with a soft click as neat as a librarian closing a book. By the time I got back to the counter, I was angry, because that was easier than being freaked out. I pulled the drawer open and grabbed the key for room 12. Cold, colder than the rest of the keys. I buzzed Raj and told him the room had checked itself out at 3. He sighed and told me to note it and go look for the guest in the parking lot. I walked the lot with a flashlight, and a gray cat came out from under a car and circled my ankles, and I said, "I don't like this," to nobody in particular. I found the guest 20 minutes later in the convenience store, sitting on a plastic bucket they used to stock the coolers. His name was Wayne. He was a trucker with a face like a sunburn and a hat that said Mesa in blunted thread. He held a cup of coffee like you hold a small animal you're scared of dropping. "I was asleep and heard a voice tell me to get out," he said, like he was embarrassed to even say it out loud. "Door opened and everything. I figured maybe I messed up and wasn't supposed to be there." He didn't want to come back, even when I told him we hadn't charged him. He didn't want to say more than that. He got in his rig and left with his headlights off until he hit the highway entrance, and then they flicked on at once like he had remembered how to move. When Lena came in the next morning, I told her I'd heard it and seen it. She shrugged like that was the only way the night could have gone. "You shouldn't go in the room when it happens," she said, and I realized how casual I had been about it. "If they want to leave, let them leave." "Who are they?" I asked. She shrugged again, less like she didn't know and more like she didn't want to pin it down with words. "Alma, the housekeeper, who came in at 5 to start the day's laundry, made a sign of the cross when she heard, then said, 'Leave the room open for a day,' in a tone like she meant it more than she meant most things. The second week it happened. 3 doors on the left wing opened at once. Room 8, room 10, room 11. The keys clicked against each other on the rack as if someone had brushed by them with a sleeve. The voice said it again, the same cadence, the same softness against my ears. It's time to leave. I didn't go into any of those rooms. I stood with my hands on the counter and watched the doors open on the camera and stayed there until the minute ticked to 3:01 and the lobby felt like it had exhaled. We told ourselves stories to explain it. The building is old and the door frames swell. The HVAC cycles at that hour and changes the pressure. The software does weird things on the hour and makes the keys out of alignment, like how grocery store scales wobble to 0. That night, after the 3 doors opened, the reservation system showed those rooms as checked out, even though nobody had come to the counter. I could still see their suitcases on the cameras. When Alma went to those rooms the next morning, she found the beds made, clothes gone, toothbrushes forgotten by the sink. The showers had been run recently. In room 11, she found a phone charger and 2 wet footprints on the bath mat that didn't lead anywhere. The first guest who talked to me about it directly was a teacher named Clare who was driving to a conference with another teacher named Aaron. They were the kind of people who stacked their reusable bottles in a perfect line and put their shoes neatly by the door, as if someone would be grading them on their civility. It was a Thursday. Quiet, except for a couple in a fight somewhere down the hall. Claire came to the lobby at 3:15 wearing a hoodie over a t-shirt that said public school. Teachers do it with class. She looked like she was trying hard to be rational about what she was about to say. At 3, she said, "Our door opened by itself and we heard a woman tell us to leave. I swear I locked it. I swear I set the chain. We were both awake because we couldn't sleep. Aaron said he heard it too." Aaron was behind her, not wanting to be in the room, not wanting not to be in the room. He nodded like a man signing a form. "We heard it in the bathroom too, like it was in the tile." "We left," she added, because it sounded serious. Like when a fire drill isn't a drill. I offered them coffee. These moments felt like offering bread to people who had seen a shape in a window they couldn't name. Claire took a cup and said, "Does this happen a lot here?" And I said, "Sometimes." And she looked at me like she appreciated the honesty and hated it at the same time. After that, I started watching the clock more. It got to where my shoulders would get tight around 2:40, and I'd walk the porch to make sure the window locks were set because those old sliders love to jiggle themselves open. I bought door wedges from the store and offered them to people as a courtesy, like we were the kind of place that did that. Some took them. Some laughed and set them aside. One guy, heavyset in a brown jacket that must have been hot in July, looked at the wedge and said, "If something wants in, a piece of rubber won't stop it." And I wished I believed he was just talking to hear himself talk. I stayed past my shift one morning to talk to Raj when he came in. He listened and then told me what he always told me. Note it, comp rooms if needed. Don't let it spread on social media. Remind staff not to feed it. I asked him if the owner had a story about the place, if there was a gas leak once or a fire or a person who died and now haunts the pipes. He looked at me in a way I hadn't seen before, and I realized he had a story and didn't want to give it words. The previous owner had a thing about drills, he said eventually. They had the staff do evacuations at 3. Gas company. Checks. Will you check alarms at 3? Go room to room and practice knocking at 3? It was annoying. People left. That owner lost the place in a recession. Now we have a new owner who doesn't like those conversations. That's it, I said, frustrated. Practice makes permanent. Raj shrugged. But there was something in the way his hand curled around the mouse that said the conversation wasn't interesting to him, because he'd already decided what not to think. The night everything got weird enough to make me leave for good was in late summer after a storm that didn't break the heat. It just threw it around and put the air conditioner into a losing fight. The highway had an accident 10 miles out, so a state trooper was diverting traffic to the frontage road, and every car that needed a place to stop ended up in our lot. We had a family reunion wedge into the lobby with a bag of tamales. We had a couple asleep in their car with the AC on and a dog panting in the back. We had a traveling baseball team with uniforms that smelled like grass and frustration. All the rooms were full by midnight and people kept coming and sitting on the floor and charging their phones and asking me if I had anything, even a cot, even a couch, even a laundry room. I spent the hour before 3 walking around with bottled water, pretending this was hospitality and not triage. Alma had come back in because she heard the storm, and she sometimes just helps because she likes to be where people are when they're tired. She made coffee she insists is better than the China tea bags we provide and handed it to people without asking. A man in a suit with no tie kept saying he would pay anything to be horizontal for an hour. A kid from the baseball team fell asleep, sitting up and slid down the wall like a quilt. The second hand on my phone passed 2:59, and I felt the lobby take a breath in. I can't explain it better than that. Not cooler, not warmer, not brighter. Just a sense like a room before a speech. Starts. The ice machine clicked off for no reason. The vending machine made a hollow clack like the last soda settling. The lobby door settled inward against its pneumatic arm. It started in the left wing. Room 6's deadbolt turned. Room 7's door opened. 3 inches, and the chain slid to the end of its track. The brass keys on the rack tilted, one by one. Then the entire strip leaned forward like a row of books about to fall. In the right wing, Room 17's door opened, then Room 18's, then 19's, a line of black mouths on the camera feeds. The bell on the counter hummed against its string. The voice said it once, and then again, and then again. Not louder, never louder, just like a steady current through everything. It's time to leave. It's time to leave. It's time to leave. People woke. Claire and Aaron were somewhere in the crowd, and their faces changed from sleep to alert like a switch had been thrown. A mother with a toddler stood at once and said, "Okay," to somebody, maybe the toddler, maybe the room. The baseball coach put his hand on a kid's shoulder and guided him without any extra words. The man with the dog clipped the leash on, with hands that could already see the outdoors. There wasn't panic. That was the strangest part. It felt orderly, like the best fire drill you've ever seen. Like a school where the principal is kind and the children are scared but focused. We flowed into the hall. I tried to go the other way. That was my job, I told myself. Staff goes toward the event. Staff checks rooms. Staff makes sure no one is confused. I got as far as the exit sign and my body turned of its own accord to face the parking lot. It was like being in a river that would let you swim sideways but not upstream. Alma put her hand on my elbow and said low, "Not that way." And I listened to her because all the cells in my skin were already listening. We stood under the porch where the storm had thrown leaves and bits of paper and one plastic cup plastered to the boards like it had been painted on. The voice moved through us and away, down the line of rooms and out to the edge of the lot where the highway hissed. It didn't boom. It didn't echo. It applied itself to the place like a gentle hand on a shoulder. Doors stood open, some with suitcases half zippered, some with TV lights still on. Somewhere a sink ran for a moment and then stopped. We watched nothing. We were looking at the dark being exactly itself. Then something happened. I still don't know how to put into words without sounding like I'm trying too hard. The lobby lights flickered twice. A rumble went through the ground that I first thought was a truck on the frontage road, except the frontage road had been dead quiet since the detour was lifted 20 minutes earlier. For a fraction of a second, the air in front of me looked bent, like heat above a grill. From the far end of the left wing, a sound like a door slamming came, and then another and another, a wave down the porch. When it reached us, the air smelled strongly of rain, even though the storm had pushed past hours before. My eyes watered, and I noticed everybody else rub their faces too. Like whatever was in the air annoyed the same place in all of us. The voice said it one more time and stopped so cleanly that I could hear the musty hum of the soda machine settling back down. We all went back inside because we were polite, because we were tired, because we didn't know what else to do. The doors that had opened were closed now, and you could hear some of the chains sliding back into place, like something tidying up after itself. I stood at the counter and watched the keys on the rack set themselves back in their exact positions. I checked the reservation system and watched 4 rooms change to checked out without any input from me. Raj texted me, "You good?" because the cameras send him movement alerts at night. I typed, "Fine," because I didn't know what else to type. He sent a thumbs up and a sentence about overtime codes, and I felt a bubble of laughter come up in my throat that didn't make it past my teeth. We lost people that night in the easiest way to lose someone. They left. They got in their cars. Some came back in the morning for receipts. Some didn't. I've thought about the man with the dog and how the dog stood very still while the voice spoke and then pulled at the leash once like it understood the rules, and I wonder if they turned left or right when they hit the highway and whether turning could even be called deciding. Wayne, the trucker from week 1, came back 3 nights later and asked for room 12 without flinching. He had the crease that long drive sleep gives people, like all the muscles around the eyes had been put on a hanger and left to rest. He said, "I lost 2 hours on the new routing and your place is clean and I don't care about ghosts." He put his toothbrush in the bathroom glass and laid his hat on the dresser and locked his door with a click I could see on the camera like a punctuation mark. At 3, his door opened only as far as the chain allowed. The voice spoke. The chain drew back. The door swung open. He came to the lobby carrying his hat and his toothbrush and his keys and set them on the counter and looked at me like he was finally asking for help with something he had been stubborn about. I told him he could sit in the lobby until morning. He did. He slept sitting up and didn't snore like he was afraid to make a noise above a whisper. The next day he told me a story about a garage fire in another state and a night when the alarm didn't go off and how he had trouble sleeping if anything beeped slower than his heart. He asked me whether I thought the voice was someone we could thank. I said I didn't know what I thought, and that answer felt like the only honest one I had. 2 days after the big night, Raj called a meeting at noon. He doesn't like meetings, but he doesn't like chaos more. Half the staff sat in the lobby on the little couch and half of us stood. He said we would lean into it as a guest safety thing without encouraging weirdness. He put a box of new door wedges on the counter and said, "Offer them with a smile." And I pictured the wedges back under beds, little rubber triangles lost like sandals after a beach day. Alma said we should open all the doors at 2:59 so the rooms wouldn't have to do it themselves. Raj said no, because the owner would have a problem with the security implications. Lena said a woman on Facebook had posted about the voice as a blessing, and we should call it the 3 a.m. courtesy. Raj pinched the bridge of his nose and told us we would lose our franchise if we turned into a circus. I decided to quit exactly a week later for a very personal reason that, if you've read this far, won't sound like a reason to anyone who hasn't stood in this lobby at night. My apartment is 20 minutes away on the other side of a strip mall and a field that grows sunflowers like it's their job. I keep odd hours, which is to say that my life is peppered with moments when the world is asleep and I am not. That night I fell into bed at 4 and set my phone face down and slept harder than people should sleep after a sympathetic nervous system workout. At 2:59 I woke up like someone had put a hand on my wrist. I looked at my phone and watched the minutes flip to 3. The doorknob on my apartment door turned. The chain slid to the end of its slot and held. the voice said, perfectly clearly, close to me as my own name whispered in the dark. It's time to leave. I sat upright and said out loud, no. The chain slid back into place. I didn't sleep again. I sat there until sunrise, watching. The line where the light under the door lives, and thinking about people you've never met who arrange themselves around you at weird hours in a lobby, and how the world can reseat itself around a phrase as simple as that. I packed the next day. I went to the Pines at 6 and handed Raj the master ring and told him I couldn't keep doing it. He didn't ask why. He looked relieved and guilty all at once, like he felt bad that he could feel relieved. I helped Alma fold towels because it felt like a decent thing to do, and because there are worse ways to say goodbye to a place than by making it cleaner than you found it. That night, because I am weak and curious, and because I wanted to prove something to myself about whether I had made the right decision, I parked in the far edge of the lot at 250 and watched the building from outside. The lobby light threw a square on the tile. The porch lamps made halos on the wood. A moth hammered itself against the bulb in a way that seemed dramatic only because I was waiting. At 3, the moth stopped. The lamps dimmed and steadied again. 3 doors opened on the left and 2 on the right. The voice passed through the world like a front that isn't weather. The cat came out from under a car and looked right at me as if to say, see. The keys on the rack slid forward and set themselves down. Someone in room 5 laughed once like they had found a joke in the dark. Someone in room 19 cried in a way that was not fear, so much as relief mixed with grief. The sound you make when you realize you've stayed too long somewhere you promised yourself you would only visit. And then it was 3:01 and nothing happened. And everything kept happening. I don't have an explanation. I want to. I want to say someone died in a way that makes a clean moral out of it. I want to say the pipes whistle at a certain temperature and that the key rack is on a slope you can't see. If you offered me that, I'd take it because I am tired of being the person who knows a simple sentence can move a building. People ask, if I ever tell this story in pieces at bars or at family things where they're mixing drinks and liking the part of you that a story outlines, whether I think the voice is trying to hurt anyone, I don't think so. No one has ever been pushed down the stairs or had a chair thrown. We lose guests by losing them the normal way. They leave, they don't write reviews, they avoid town because the long way feels safer. Sometimes I think it's something the building decided to keep doing after someone who used to live there did it for real. Practice makes permanent, Raj said once, half as a joke. The building practiced evacuating and now it cannot stop. Or, it is the opposite of a haunting. Or it is the cleanest kind of haunting. The kind that wants you gone because something is about to happen that you don't need to see. Twice since I left, I've read about minor things that happened near exit. 41 at odd hours, a blown transformer, a small kitchen fire in the convenience store microwave when someone put the foil lid in without thinking, a truck that rolled its load at the bend and spilled a tide of gravel across the frontage road. None of those would have affected us directly. All of them happened between 3 and 3:15. You can call that cherry picking and you wouldn't be wrong. I'm tired of arguing with my own fear like it is a person I can convince. I moved to a day job in a coffee shop that plays acoustic covers of songs that used to mean something to me and now mean that someone learned guitar at home during a long winter. I sleep better, but once in a while, if I am up too late, or if I wake and the room is so quiet I can hear the dog down the hall of the building shake its collar and settle, I will watch 2:59 tip into 3 and something in the apartment will go slack. A picture frame tilting or the margin of the door blackening with a shadow that looks thicker. I will get up and check the latch and the chain and the back window and tell myself it's just the hour when the world resets itself and then you find your place inside it again. A couple weeks ago, Claire sent a postcard to the coffee shop because she had my name from the receipt I'd given her the first night. It was a picture of a state capitol and the back said, "We went back by because we liked your coffee and because we wanted to see if we imagined it. We didn't. We left again at 3 and didn't feel stupid about it. Maybe that's what it's for." Her handwriting was careful, like a teacher grading herself by mistake. This morning the shop's door opened on its own right when the first gray got serious outside. It wasn't 3, it was close enough. The bell above the door didn't ring. It vibrated, a sound not everyone would hear if they weren't listening for it. I said to the empty doorway, "We don't open yet." And then I said, with my mouth tasting like coffee grounds and whatever road dust follows someone out of their life and into someone else's, "Okay, I hear you. If you ever find yourself at a place off a long highway where the rooms are clean enough and the key rack is heavy enough and the night staff looks like they're standing at the edge of a pool deciding whether to jump, pay attention to your phone if it's near 3. Pay attention to the air shift that isn't cold but feels like a cold idea. If a voice tells you it's time to leave, don't make a scene. Gather your things and go sit under the porch or in your car. Call me gullible. Call me dramatic. But I like the version of the world where a building that has practiced leaving for too long will help you leave too. I like the version where something that isn't a person still cares enough to tap the keys toward the drawer and pull the chain aside so the door doesn't catch and give you just enough time, exactly enough to get out.